Good morning, everyone. Welcome to meeting 6, day 2 of the Mathematics Curriculum Frameworks and Evaluation Criteria Committee. Denise, will you please call roll call?
Addie Spiegler.
Here.
Lena Bradshaw.
Here.
Aaron Frazier.
Here.
Lori Firemuth.
Here.
Lori Fury.
Here.
Lindsay Gatfield.
Here.
Crystal Gomez.
Here.
Janet Hollister.
Here.
Lisa Hogerman.
Here.
Stephanie Holloway.
Here.
Andrew Huffaker.
Here.
Janie Kim.
Here.
Rebecca Pariso.
Here.
Christina Rubalcava.
Here.
Bernadette Salgarino.
Here.
Cole Sampson.
Here.
Rosa Serratore. Diane Wilson.
Here.
Rosa Serratore. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, we have a full day ahead of us, so we'll go ahead and just get started right away. We have several chapters to review, beginning with our whole group consensus for Chapter 6, TK through Grade 5. Before we do that, I'll hand it over to Constantino Silva to walk us through our procedures and today's agenda.
Thank you, Director Coates. Good morning, everybody. On our agenda today, we'll review the norms as we normally do, and then we will get into our first discussion of the day, reviewing, as Director Coates said, doing the consensus discussion for Chapter 6, which is the grade levels, transitional kindergarten through grade 5. We'll then take a break, after which time we will go into the small group discussions for Chapter 7. We'll then come back. Actually, we'll go to lunch at that time at approximately 11:50. And we will return for the whole group discussion of Chapter 7. We'll have a break in between that activity and the next activity, which will be the small group discussion for Chapter 8, which is the grade bands of 9 through 12. We'll take a break and have public comment, and we will wrap up our activities for today with our whole group discussion on Chapter 8, and we will wrap up the day with a preview of our December meetings. Very briefly, the norms, which, again, you're all familiar with, but please be present and focused at all times. If your camera is not on, we will assume that you're away. Please monitor your airtime using the rule of thumb, the 3 before me rule. When you're not speaking, please leave your microphone muted to alleviate background noise and feedback. Do raise your hand when you wish to be recognized in order to speak. And when voting, please leave your votes up, and we will turn off the votes here in the main room. And then finally, of course, the usual reminder of the background lighting so that you don't appear as a silhouette. A quick note about public comment. Members of the public, you can view the whole group discussions via the CDE webcast, and you will be able to access the small groups via the Zoom links that we provide. However, public comment will take place via the telephone line listed on the screen. Today, public comment will be at 3:30 in the afternoon. We will project this slide again at that time. Additionally, if you wish to submit written public comments, please use the Math Framework mailbox address that appears on the screen. Comments received during this meeting will be provided to the Math CFCC members at the next meeting of the Math CFCC and will be made available to the public, but they will not be read aloud. Okay, the reminders out of the way. We are ready to begin the whole group discussion on Chapter 6, Mathematics for Understanding, Transitional Kindergarten through Grade 5. I will now turn it over to our co-chairs.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see you all.
If you have not had a chance to open the bit.ly, you can follow along on the screen share. And at the top there, it lets us know that there are 7 comments highlighted in yellow that we will consider. And then there are 25 new comments that have been added in Tier 4. There were 2 comments that are turned red with a strike through, and then there are no red highlighted comments that we need to consider. So that means we'll start with the yellow ones. So we are on comment number 2. And it looks like maybe that was Cole who had that comment. And so is there anyone who would like to speak to that? Sorry, I got muted. Cole, go ahead.
I'd actually go ahead, and I believe we actually addressed this in our Tier 4. We were much more specific, so we can go ahead and strike it here. And then we've added some guidance on what I was trying to say down below.
Okay. Is there any objection to striking comment 2? And I see no hands raised. So we will move on to comment 10. And is there anyone who wishes to speak to this one? Lori, go ahead.
Hi, I was hoping that Lindsay could tell us a little bit more about what a number path is because I'm unfamiliar with that term.
Yeah, so there was, my computer was freezing. I wasn't at number 10 yet. So the number path, that was just a lot of conferences and a lot of people have been saying that for the last few years, that the number line is developmentally appropriate starting in 2nd grade. And I think that this came up in the number sense chapter as well. And so I just want it to be consistent because initially it had said to use a number path in TK to 2. And I know Katie early, I had mentioned to her that research and she was kind of like, oh yeah, I don't know why it says TK to 2. And so the number path is more of like squares or something there so that it actually has like something for the students to count and use because it's more developmentally appropriate for them to have that versus a number line looks more of like a measurement format for them where they're supposed to be looking at like individual blocks to count. That makes sense. I don't know if anyone can chime in on that, but has been my understanding.
Thank you. And any additional comments or questions on this one? And I see no hands, so would you please vote on number 10? Remember, a green turns it, or a yes turns it green and sends it to the writers.
We have 15 yes and 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
All right, comment number 15. And is there anyone who would like to speak to this one? Lindsay.
So it says that there are over half of English learners in this context. And then it says out of the 30 students, 11 of them are English learners. And so I don't know if they're talking about the school or if that math just needs to change because when you add up the different levels of ELs, it adds up to 11 and that wouldn't be. So if we're trying to paint this over half of the class is an English learner, I just felt like there should be over half of the number.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. And would you please?
Diane, this is Bernadette.
Yes. Yes.
And I know this correct me if I'm wrong, Delta group, but we also discussed this particular comment. And I think we had more than this as a comment to lines 105 through 107. But I wonder if we included that in our Delta comment, because I'm not seeing it, because we also thought about adding something to this one besides qualifying what that 1/2 or that 30 students mean in this comment.
Thank you. And Stephanie?
Yeah, I believe in our Delta group, just more conversation centered around that in general came up, but what Lindsay is just talking about here is just simply the math of the demographics that they were discussing. I don't think she was specifically talking about, and correct me, Lindsay, if I'm wrong, about anything further than just that the math was wrong. 11 out of 30 is not half.
Yes, that's all I was referring to.
Okay, so it sounds like maybe there's a different consideration for these lines down in additional comments. All right, so any other comment or question about 15 as it's written? And I see none. Will you please vote for number 15?
We have 17 yes.
Consensus.
Comment number 20. Janet.
So this is my comment, and when I read Cole's comment number 2 that was asking for pacing, I realized that I'm not sure that I fully understand what the categories of investigation are, and so we just discussed it in our group. Our categories of investigation, taking sort of the major work of the grade and threading in the sort of supporting standards. And so it could be linked to domains, possibly in some way with domains and supporting standards, or are they actually ways of working? And so I was looking at it one way. I think Cole was looking at it another way, and I'm still working to understand categories of investigation. So I'm not sure if my or not. I think that people can just weigh in on it.
Thank you. Lori Rierma. Lori, I'm not sure. Did you put your hand down or did you still want to make a comment?
Sorry, I need to unmute myself. Sorry. So I don't know if it's appropriate, but if you look down at comment number 74, I'm never on mute when I'm teaching, so I'm so used to just being unmuted and just speaking. If you look at comment number 74, I think what Janet is saying is a lot of the same things we had. And I don't know, Janet, if comment 74 adds any clarity, because we also discussed the same idea that we were really struggling with exactly what made up a COI and how would we get a PLC, grade level group, even individual teacher to really understand that. So this is what we came up with, and I don't know if, Janet, this helps you, hurts you, gets to the idea. So I'm just kind of throwing this out. These were some of the things that we came up with along those lines.
All right, Janet and then Lindsay.
So thank you. That is really much. I was trying to make sense of these and how to support people to understand what they are. I think that yours is much more specific, and when we get there, it would be a great conversation. And if there's anything we need to add, so I am perfectly happy to withdraw my comment 15, or not sure where I am. Comment
20.
20. I am perfectly happy to withdraw my comment 20 in lieu of what's coming up in the future.
All right, thank you. And Lindsay, did you still want to speak to this one then?
Yeah, I was just going to tell Janet, after you left yesterday, there's a public comment too that we added in Tier 4 that does talk about the actual standards that align with that and the math practices. So I feel like between those two comments, you're set with what we were talking about with this.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for helping to clarify that one. Is there any objection to striking number 20? I see no hands, so we will move on to number 25. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this one? Christina.
So in our group, we had this discussion. I agree with the fact that the standards should be noted consistently throughout, but I thought it might be nice for us to agree on how we want them named throughout, rather than leaving that open. So sometimes we've seen it with a letter for the cluster, sometimes we haven't. This goes along with the comment I made for the high school chapter that there's no consistency. So I just thought we should make a decision on which one we want so we can give that direction to the writers.
And thank you. And Cole?
And I want us to consider too, like how they're called out in Claim 1 by Target and how there's not really any guidance on how that matches up with the blueprint. Like, can we be kind of consistent and provide that? Because I know that's a big struggle for educators too. So if there's a way to encompass all of that.
So are you asking to amend comment 25 to also include a standardized way to talk about claims and targets?
I think we have a real opportunity to kind of align those two pieces of work. Because I know that when they lay them out in the clusters, it goes like A, B, C, D, and then it starts over with A. But when they lay it out on the blueprints, it's like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it goes down, the list. And trying to help teachers understand why A and E are the same, that's a challenge sometimes. So if we could figure out a way to help align that would be great. I don't know, Diane, exactly what my comment is here, but I'm just like, that's my thinking right now about that.
All right, thank you. And I'm wondering if we want to ask the writers to weigh in because perhaps they've had this conversation already. So it might be helpful to hear their thinking if there's anyone who wants to speak to that.
Sure, I can. This is Brian. I can weigh in a little bit. We have had conversations about whether or how to refer to the standards consistently. We've talked about the SMPs. Is it SMP2? Is it SMP .2? Things like that. So we're happy to go with whatever the CFCC would decide here, and we can adjust, of course, the whole framework to fit that. Whatever you feel like is best.
All right, thank you. So, Christina, did you have any suggestions about how to standardize referring to these?
Well, Cole's point is slightly different, but many of the districts I support use tools like the coherence map, which lists out a letter for the cluster. And it can help us also make sense of if I just list without the cluster letter, then teachers are having to refer back to the standards and sort of count which cluster is that. So by giving them that letter, I think it would help them to know, okay, it's not this first group, it's this next group of standards. So I personally like the cluster letter included. So sort of it would go like for high school, conceptual, category, domain, cluster letter, and then standard. But I think that convention is pretty similar to what you would see in the K-8 world as well. But that's my personal opinion.
Janet, thank you.
So I just have a question about whether there's going to be times when we only want to refer to the cluster and not the standard, because I'm thinking in terms of categories for investigation, you're probably not digging into a standard level. And so when is it that you want to apply to acknowledge a cluster leading with the letter? And then when is it that you might want to particularly call out standards? I think that's another thing to think about.
Thank you. And Katie.
Thanks for letting me say something here. Yes, I think Janet just hit on something that's been in my way here, is sometimes you don't want to identify a specific standard in order to address a big idea. And so I appreciate this conversation very much. I think, as Brian pointed out, consistency on whether we're going to refer to SMPs or MPs, that kind of thing, I think is very important. But I think there might be times when we don't want to identify a particular standard. That makes sense to people.
Thank you. And Christina and then Bernadette.
Yeah, so I wasn't saying the standard needed to be included at all times. I just meant if we're going to go down to the standard level in that order. But yeah, I agree. For when we're talking about categories of investigation, we're talking about multiple standards at once. So my proposal is really just include the letter for the cluster. That so it doesn't have to go down to the standards level.
Thank you. And Bernadette?
And I'm in support of that, Christina. I think we still can do it because as I'm looking at the standards right now, we still can name it at the cluster level point without the numbers. So if we are to say, let's say a grade level, then the specific domain, and then the cluster letter, and that speaks to just the cluster. If we include the grade level standard, then that goes to specific to that grade level standard. So I think what Christina is mentioning is to include those letters under a certain domain, because that also aligns with SBAC's naming through the targets underneath those domains. So that's my understanding. I think that letter that speaks to a cluster underneath a domain is going to be very helpful for our teachers. And that also can be consistent with our high school grade band.
Diane.
Thank you.
Diane Constantino here. Diane,
Sure.
so just it sounds to me like there's an amendment to the recommendation. What's the exact wording that you would like us to add?
So Christina, the way I understand it is instead in the parentheses, maybe you're asking to change it to include the cluster letter?
Yes.
And then do we want to add a second part that addresses whether we're going to use SMPs or MPs? Would that be an appropriate place to do that? And Christina, would you be okay with that?
I'm okay with that, but I thought we had that conversation in an earlier session where we had designated the SMPs. I don't know if we talked about the dot. It's fine with me either way. If we want to do it as a comment later on or add it to this, I'm okay either way.
Okay. So for now, we'll leave it this way. And Lori Freeman.
I was just thinking, trying to make this a little more general direction is maybe since we're talking about different levels for each. So depending on whatever you're speaking about, be as detailed as possible. So if you're talking about a specific standard, be detailed, all the information leading up to that or down to that standard, cluster, domain, grade level, yada, yada. I don't know if I'm making sense. If you're not speaking about a specific standard, still be as detailed as possible with whatever information you're providing. So if you're just, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think what we're looking for is detail, consistency and detail and numbering. Maybe, or referencing.
Thank you. So Christina, would you want to add any of that language into the comment?
Yeah, so I'm okay with that. So include the cluster level, I would say, and basically include all of the information leading up to the level of specificity you're referring to. So if you're referring to a cluster, you would go up to that cluster level letter and you would stop. If you're referring to a specific standard, for an example, then you could go including the cluster level to the standard.
All right. Give Kyle a minute to catch up there. All right. So Christina, does that comment accurately reflect at this point what you would like us to consider?
Yes, there's one thing I kept saying level, and I meant the cluster letter. So where it says include the cluster, yeah, it should be letter. Thank you.
Okay. And then the level of specificity is correct, though? Okay. She gave me a thumbs up.
That like in line 1082 should be struck through, though. That was part of my original comment. It doesn't make sense anymore.
Oh, sorry, Lindsay. I was thinking we were changing Christina's comment, not your comment. I should have been asking you these things. So, Lindsay, are you good with this, or is there something you'd like to change?
No, it's totally, yeah, it's fine.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll give everybody a second to read the comment the way it stands. Do we need to strike in line 1082?
I think everything in the parentheses, like the to the letter and some, we don't need that anymore because it already says include the cluster letter.
Okay. All right. So the way the comment is right now is how we are going to vote on it. So is there any additional discussion?
Can I just make a request here? That
sure.
There are maybe the two types of things that have been suggested, like just to be very clear that there is a call out to a specific standard, how you want to see that, and then a call out up to the cluster heading. Can we just see just particular examples? We can just make up some. I don't know what they are, but I would just.
All right, we can do that. Anyone want to offer a suggestion there? I see people consulting resources. Lindsay, go ahead.
Do you mean just like how it would look like 3 OA A1?
Right. The different, and then what does it look like that if it's just we're going just up to the cluster heading? Is that just going to be 3.OA, and there are points?
Yes, and then Kyle, so OA and then dot or period. And then capital A again. And then period. There you go. And then so you're saying then if it's just the cluster, do we don't put a period after the A, right? Or
right, it would just be 3.OA.
And then dot capital A. And then there's no period after the 1 in the first example.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. And Bernadette.
And if there are sub-standards underneath the standard 2, we can also say 3.NF.A. Okay, so I'm just looking at 3NF, then A.2, small letter A, because there are 2 substandards underneath 2. If you're looking at it, there's A and there's B.
Thank you. Are there any other examples we need to include to make this comprehensive? Cole.
So I just have kind of a question now, I guess, since we have the writers here. And are we ever kind of thinking about getting this finite in our planning and thinking with these big ideas? This is for my own understanding. Or are we staying more conceptually at the standard level might be the lowest?
I don't recall, Cole, if we have cited substandards. Is that what you're asking about? I don't.
And I think I'm just trying to still wrap my mind around like planning this out. Like, are we taking teachers all the way down like to this super isolated finite level, or are we staying kind of at this bigger like cluster level in our planning and think? I guess I'm still kind of trying to wrap my mind, like how deep are we going, I guess, in this?
Well, the overall tenor of the framework has to be more focused on bigger ideas and less focused on at the atomic level of substandards. However, all the standards need to be taught. So the idea is that there are tasks within these categories of investigation that can cover many standards. So we would need to list all of those standards, but it would be much easier to just list them at the cluster level, I think, like has been suggested here. So I really like that idea. Potentially even, and there may be times, I don't know that we would just want to refer to the domain at a particular grade level, so it would just be 3.0A, but that's probably not as nearly as specific enough to be useful as opposed to the cluster, the 3.0A.A.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And Christina?
I was just going to tag on. I think having this example for substandards might be useful. And again, I'm coming from the high school lens, but in the framework from 2013, there are certain substandards that are not included at a particular course level. So like for Math 1, I might not do D and E, but I might do A, C, and F in the next course. So I think sometimes, having that example when that's the case might be useful.
Thank you. And then I was wondering, and I don't know that we've done this in other chapters, but now that we have settled on a format, or assuming that this gets voted to move forward, can we ask that then this be applied across all chapters so that we don't have to add the comment into every chapter?
Yes, we can. I don't know, can folks at CDE think of the mechanism by which we can take comments and sent to us that apply to all? Because it's our understanding that the consensus comments have each applied to each chapter, and while we can try to remember to apply it to all, it would be nice if there was, and I know at some point we're going to transition to the whole document. So I don't know if CDE can have sort of a separate location where we can have global for the whole framework, consistency, things like this. That would be, and then have those comments sent to the writing team as well.
Yeah, hi,
We're
Constantine.
happy to standardize as much as we can. But
Sure. I think that's a great idea, Dr. Lindemann, and I had been waiting for an opportune moment to make this comment, and I think this is a very pertinent and valuable discussion that you're having, and putting in these examples are excellent. And the thought that I was having is that this is information that would need to be included in the overview of the standards section of the framework, where that will kind of set the tone and provide an explanation and examples of the coding to be expected throughout the framework. So I think maybe if you just add a note to this comment, please apply to the overview of the standards, that then sort of is the impetus to apply it to the entire framework, because it's going to be in the introductory overview section, and therefore it has to follow that the entire framework would need to follow these patterns and examples.
Thank you. And Lindsay.
I just wasn't sure what everyone felt. Do most people do that period small a, or just two? I've always seen it just two and then the A without a period in between the two. So I just wanted to check that we're all on the same page for that.
All right. If you'd like to comment on that, you certainly can. And then, Rebecca's hand went down. Dr. Lindemann.
I just wanted to, I think, clarify for Kyle. I had said domain, but that one wasn't on there yet. So if we kind of go in order, I think it's standard there, Kyle, where you have domain would be standard. And then there would be, if we did all the level, there would be 3.0A would just be the domain level for that particular grade. Thank you.
Thank you. And Janet.
So just to finish this off, can we add in whatever the thinking is on SMPs if we haven't done that, but at least so that they're all in one spot? So if we're doing SMP or MP, I don't remember what we've discussed before, but this seems like the ideal place to just put SMPs.
All right. And do you have a suggestion which, because we need to vote one way or the other. So do you have a suggestion which you would like to?
So I would just put out there SMP space 1, but I'm flexible.
And our recollection here at the department is that you had that discussion and you had decided on SMP, whether or not it had a period after or not. I don't recall, but I believe you had already decided SMP.
Thank you. And Rebecca?
I was actually just going to comment from Lindsay there. I agree. I think it's a little strange for the substandards to have a period between, like that last one between the 2 and the A. I'd like to see it. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but if I had a preference, I would prefer it to not be there.
And Katie or Dr. Early?
Yeah, thank you. When I do my editing for the California Mathematics Communicator, we are consistently using the period after the SMP. So we would have SMP period 1. And that's why I've been typing it that way. I don't mind changing, but it seems inconsistent. So I was hoping we could keep it with the period there.
So I'd say put the period in there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I was very clear. I wasn't talking about the SMP. I was talking about the one above it. Yeah, there we go. There, yeah.
Thank you. Lori Fury?
I think if we're going to be consistent, we should put that period back in there, but that's just me.
Thank you. And Christina?
Yeah, I don't feel strongly either way, but I was just curious. I went to the coherence map to see how they did it because we've sort of used that that formatting for the others, and they do have the period in there. I've seen it both, so I don't feel strongly, but I don't know what the group thinks.
Thank you. And any other comments on this? And then Lindsay, because it's your comment, I'm going to ask you to choose. Do you want us to consider this with the period between the 2 and the A or without the period?
That seems like a lot of pressure. Could we vote on just the period, if there's a period or not?
I like that. Let's vote.
Let's vote on if we have a period or not, and then we could vote on comment 25.
Okay, that sounds good to me. All right, so if you are in favor of including the period between 2 and A, would you please vote yes? Otherwise, vote no.
Seven yes, 5 no, 5 I can live with it.
And we just met the threshold. Yes, that has consensus.
All right. Are there any other edits to the comment that we need to vote on? That was a good idea. Thank you, Lindsay. Anything else to vote on before we consider the entire comment? And I see no other hands, so please vote your preference for comment number 25 the way it stands now.
$15 yes, 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Thank you. Comment number 44.
I would like,
go ahead.
Leanne.
That's fine, go ahead.
I'd like to withdraw my comment here. I misread that line. Measurement and data is the correct phrase.
All right, thank you. Is there any objection to this comment being withdrawn? I see none, so that comment is withdrawn. And it looks like we are to the tier 4 comments. And as Lori did yesterday, I'm going to give you, a little chunk of time to actually look through the comment and have a minute to look up in the document where you find it. So we're going to start with Alpha Group comments. So comment number 62.
Diane, Constantino once again. And just a reminder, we have until 10:25 And the tier 4s, it's basically through as many as you can get here. That's where we will need to stop.
Thank you. All right, so I believe this comment comes up again too, line 313 to 314, Lindsay.
So this was actually a comment that was made earlier, but it was withdrawn because it was connected to another comment on accident. There wasn't that enter. But basically that last sentence just kind of reiterates what it was said in the sentence before it. And it looked like someone had revised it and added in that second to last sentence and just left that last sentence on accident.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, please vote for your preference on comment 62.
Yes.
Consensus.
Thank you. Comment 63 is the next one. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this one? I see no hands, so we can vote on number 62.
63.
63.
I'm sorry, 63.
15 yes, 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, comment number 64. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this one? Aaron.
We had just talked about this in our group, that this was a nice snapshot that was developed for the State Education Environment Roundtable with Kendall Brown. And so we had added to this, though, writer's discretion as to whether to add this to this chapter or to chapter 5, because we thought that maybe it might be better suited for chapter 5, but it is a nice snapshot that incorporates ELA, environmental standards, and then also NGSS and math.
Thank you. Anyone else? I see no hands, so please vote regarding comment 64.
Consensus.
Comment 65. Is there anyone who has a comment on this? I see no hands, so please vote your preference on comment 65.
Yes.
Consensus.
Thank you. Comment 66. Anyone who'd like to comment on this? There are no hands, so we'll vote on number 66.
16 yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Comment 67. Anyone who wishes to speak to this one? There are no hands, so we will vote regarding comment 67.
16 yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Comment 68. Anyone who wishes to speak to this one? There are no hands, so we will vote on comment 68.
16 yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Comment 69. Anyone who wishes to speak to this one? There are no hands. Oh, Bernadette, was that a hand or okay? You were voting, right? Okay, so yeah, we will vote regarding comment 69.
$15 yes, 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Comment 70. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to this one? And there are no hands, so we'll vote regarding comment 70.
$17 yes.
Consensus.
Right, and we are through with Alpha Group's comments, so we will move on to Beta Group, comment 71. Any comments on this one? All right, let's vote regarding 71.
Christina.
Oh, Christina, I'm sorry, I missed your hand. Did you still have a comment?
That's okay. We just, we had a discussion around this, the idea of speed learning. Some people were reading it as a noun, like speed learning is a thing. And that was where the comment 58 was coming from. But we were saying that you could say to increase or enhance student learning.
Thank you. All right, so we will vote regarding 71.
$16 yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Thank you. Comment 72.
We already voted on this one earlier in Alpha, and it was green.
Okay, that's what I thought. So we're good with just striking that one.
Great.
And comment 73. Lori, Fury.
Yeah, we were discussing that there are tables from the previous framework that give the different problem types for addition and subtraction that could be beneficial for this section.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? And Lori, did you have another comment or is your hand just left from last time?
Still up.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, so I see no additional hands, so we will vote for 73, please.
$16 yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Thank you, and we'll move on to Delta comments. And I believe this is the sort of more expanded version of a comment that was struck earlier. So is there any conversation around comment 74? Janet.
So I just like if Lori or whoever could just talk us a little bit through how you came to that to help me see if there's anything else that I think needs to be added. Would that be possible?
I'm happy to speak to it, or Cole, please jump in as well. We basically were just saying that this idea, we were confused, like we're struggling with what it actually looks like and how we develop it with other teachers, what it looks like, what it includes, how do we get the different components in it. We just needed more guidance, and we thought maybe a vignette of actually how a group of teachers or a teacher could sit down with their resources and work through developing one on their own, or the components that would go into it would be helpful.
Thank you. And Christina?
Yeah, I had a similar comment for high school because I'm still struggling to picture it as well. So for me, I was thinking about like, where do the COIs fit in the continuum of what I do in my teaching? So more guidance on implementation. If I have a large COI, how might that be structured with smaller scale lessons? So what's that, striking that balance between these larger investigations and smaller daily activities? How do they fit together? Are these categories of investigation like big units, or are they within a unit? So just more guidance on how they fit into that continuum of teaching.
Thank you. And Cole?
Yeah, and I think that what really sparked my comment on too was it's kind of along the same things that Christina. I'm really struggling to think about if I was going to go in and support a teacher to plan out a year with these categories of investigation, like are they overlapping or are they separate buckets kind of thinking, and do they all carry the same weight even though we know Achieve the Core still says there's priorities? Like how is all of that mapping out as far as the time goes? But then I'm also thinking that it should be PLC setting, but this could be a really cool opportunity to maybe have like a PLC team with their coach or with their instructional leader in that conversation and modeling for everybody what that looks like as they're laying out one of these categories of investigation.
Thank you. And Stephanie?
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, what we were discussing too is that it's more useful for teachers to build it and kind of see how a team goes about building that versus handing it to them and it has no meaning. So building it and putting together will give more meaning to the teachers as they start to develop everything centered around the COIs. Cole, would you agree? That's what yes, it was more about the building and showing what that looks like so that they have kind of a roadmap on what to follow centering around the COIs.
Thank you. Janet?
So if I propose to add to this a little bit, I think what Christina said is not highlighted in this comment. The comment says provide guidance on the purpose and design elements. But what Christina had said was how do COIs fit into the structures we already use, lessons, projects, units. So if we can, and Christina, you had some great language, maybe you want to propose, but there's an element of how do these fit into the things we're already familiar with.
Thank you. So do we want to add that language in there? And yeah, I agree. Christina said it very well. Christina, if you could help us out with language there, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I love the idea that that this group has suggested about authentically modeling how you might build that is really helpful. What I said was, how did these COIs fit into the continuum of our teaching, for the year? And then I also talked about how do we balance these larger scale investigations with smaller chunks like a daily lesson, and what's the balance, between those.
I'll give Kyle a minute to type. Thank you. And Cole.
And I think that this is just even more important, knowing that this framework is going to be out in front of curriculum by at least a couple of years if they're making these adaptations. And so if we're going to be making a transition before they have curriculum, we're going to need this desperately.
Thank you. And Erin?
I would suggest that we add this then to global too, because this is something that needs to be across and throughout the framework, not just in this elementary chapter. It needs to be for middle school and high school also. So I don't know how, following our standards idea from earlier, that somehow this needs to be incorporated globally.
Thank you. And Ben?
I was just going to say, I think it's clear we need to clarify the COI idea, and but I want to make a couple of points. One is that investigation doesn't imply a big project, right? Some of the snapshots are perfectly good investigations that are 20-minute activities. So it's not a project-based learning model at all. It doesn't imply that. That's one possible way to implement something like this. And so there's not really a question of balance between investigation and smaller projects. We see these COIs as a framing of mathematics in terms of what the math is good for. And so it's leading with, what are you interested in? What are you curious about? Now let's develop the mathematics to investigate whatever that thing is that we can somehow get kids to wonder about. And so it's a parallel it's a different organizing principle besides the content lists, cluster headings, and domains that have always dominated how we organize math courses. And it's more akin to, let's look at systems and things we're interested in and build that interest as a way to necessitate and motivate the mathematics that we want to develop. So it's not a this or content, it's content through investigating things we care about is the idea we're trying to get across. And clearly we need to do a better job of clarifying that. On the issue of balance between the different categories, I think different curricula might address that differently. So one curriculum might choose to develop most of the content through data-driven investigations. And so stories told by data might be the dominant category in that curriculum. Another one might choose a more classical modeling-based approach. And so you might see, investigating changing quantities as a more dominant theme. So there's a little bit of our thinking about those, and we'll try to clarify those a lot.
Okay, so I think my question then is, if that second question, how do we balance, remains, will that be the reminder to the writing team that there is some misunderstanding around the COIs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And then do we want to add at the end of this comment the same, I don't remember exactly the language that was used, but to include this in the introduction, I think is what it was?
The last time we discussed this, sorry, this is Kyle jumping in, it was about the overview of the standards section. It needs to be a determination of placement rather than just copying what was added previously. So.
All right. Christina?
I was just gonna say that I have a comment along these lines for the high school chapter specifically. So if we're worried about it making it there, I know there's one there. I don't know if anybody's put that one in the chapter 7, but we could also add that into the tier 4 if we need to, just to make sure it makes it in all of those.
All right, thank you. And maybe someone from CDE can help us out with how we can turn this into a global comment for the framework.
Constantino here. So I think maybe because it is something that will be a thread, if you will, throughout the entire framework, maybe I would propose possibly in the introduction chapter that there's some kind of an explanation and overview as well there. That would be one idea.
Thank you.
Can I just jump in? If that's true, we make sure there's a reference to that explanation in each grade level chapter? I'm just thinking of teachers that are pressed for time are going to grab the chapter that refers to their work immediately. That's even if they read the introduction later, they're going to grab their grade level first.
Thank you. And any other comments? All right, I see no more, so I think we're ready to vote. So take just a moment to read the entire comment now, and then when you're ready, go ahead and vote your preference for number 74.
Oh. 15 yes, 16 yes, and 1 I can live with it.
Consensus?
Thank you. And comment 75 refers back to comment 50. And comment 50 is asking for line 730 to be removed. And that one is going forward to the writers. So this one I think is not needed because it's asking to remove those ordering students by height. So I would advocate that we strike that one. And is there any objection to that? All right, thank you. So we will move to comment 76. And is there anyone who would like to speak to this one? Cool.
So this goes up to the comments that were, let's see here, 54, 55, they all went through 57, so 59, 60, and it was basically just the top 3 bullets on all of those SMP layouts didn't have the SMP behind it. They were all clustered at the bottom. So this was just clarification so people understood what I was trying to say there. But it's okay not having it if we all are on the same page. But those other comments already went through, so this would just be clarification for the writers about what it was we were asking for.
So do we need to refer back to those comments you just gave us the numbers of? 54 to, what was it?
Yeah, so it's a comment 54, 55, 57, 59, and 60.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Any additional discussion on this one? All right, can you please vote your preference for number 76?
$14 yes, 3 I can live with it.
Consensus.
And I'm thinking we already took care of comment 77. Is there anyone who's had a chance to look at that? Aaron?
Yeah, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, and 82 are all repeats from what was in alpha that's already approved.
Okay, so we can strike 77 through 82?
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any objection to that? All right, so we're on to comment number 83. And any discussion around this one? All right, please indicate your preference for 83.
Yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Thank you. Comment 84. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this one? Cool.
So this comment came from public comment, but it was referring specifically to what was in the glossary. I remember last meeting we had said that we're going to strike basically those resources and just have definitions in the glossary. So our group is just kind of proposing, now that we know it's not going to be in the glossary, do we want to make a mention of that inverted hundreds chart in this chapter? And if so, can we make sure that the one is in the bottom left corner, not the bottom right corner, so that way it does support the number path work Lindsay was referring to earlier?
Thank you. Any other comments? Janet.
So can I just ask, so the way it reads right now is you just want them to add the chart, but then when I heard you talking, you wanted, I'm not sure if it's the chart that is important or some commentary around the hundreds chart.
So I think it was more of a general, it was more of a question out of our group, like, is this something that we want to include as a resource in the TK5, especially thinking TK2? And if it is, we want to be very specific that then if we do provide that, the 1 is in the bottom left corner, because it appears that it was in the bottom right corner in the last draft of the glossary. And again, but I don't feel passionate either way about it. I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention that it will no longer be in the framework if we don't put it here.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion around this one? I see no hands, so we will vote on comment 84.
Yes, 3, I can live with it.
Consensus.
Thank you. And comment 85.
It's okay.
Any discussion? I'm sorry, Lori, say that one more time.
We can withdraw it. It's a repeat.
Oh, thank you. And number 86, is that a repeat also?
No, I don't believe it is.
Okay,
unless someone else caught it, it's new.
Thank you. Any discussion around this one? And I see no hands, so we will vote regarding 86.
Consensus.
All right, and we've reached the end of the comments. Nicely done. Thank you.
Yes, very nicely done. I think this is a good opportunity for us to take up the recommendation from the writers to change the name for Chapter 6, 7, and 8. And maybe we could add an 87 here, and maybe Dr. Lindeman, could you give us the language that the writing team is proposing?
Yes, it's mathematics, investigating and connecting.
All right, and Lori.
And that's just a proposal. Certainly, we're open to adjustments.
And it's to change mathematics for understanding to that. Is that correct?
Yes, changing from mathematics for understanding, MU, to mathematics, investigating, and connecting, MIC.
All right, thank you. And is there any discussion around this or questions for the writing team?
Diane, maybe just adding additional language there. This would be applicable to all 3 of the grade banded chapters, chapters 6, 7, and 8.
Thank you. And Cole.
Would this also then, I'm assuming, change the name of the high school pathway and the high school course proposals based on that? Or
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
And Janet?
Okay, just Cole had the same question. And I think, so the chapter titles are Math for Understanding. The proposal is to change mathematics, investigating, and connecting. So that's just title headings. And then there was a whole nother section in the high school part. And so then it's just changing the name of that section. Okay, yeah, sorry, thinking out loud.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, I'm not raising my hand. So piggybacking on that then, so mathematics, investigating, and connecting is a title of a chapter, and it's a course.
Pathway.
Am I right, Brian? Because
Yes.
Is you're also
Yes.
changing
It's
MU1, MU2, MU3 to now MIC1, MIC2, MIC3.
That's right.
But it's also is a title for 3 chapters of our framework to encompass 3 grade bands.
Yes, that is correct. And that's the thinking with the writing team, is that really mathematics that is about investigating and connecting is what we want to promote at all the grade levels. And then at the high school level, that is the name of the new proposed courses.
All right, thank you. Other questions or comments? All right, I see no more. Oh, there we go. Joe Bowler, go ahead.
Good morning. I don't know if this helps, but I was thinking that the mathematics connecting and investigating is more is more the name of the pathway in high school, and it ties together from K upwards. That there's a whole pathway that's around investigating, connecting, and in high school there's the first level course and the second level course. So are they the course names or are they the pathway names, I guess is my question.
Is there someone from the writing team who can speak to that?
Well, clearly we not quite haven't had, I guess, that full conversation at the high school level. And so maybe when we get to the high school chapter, perhaps that will become more clear later today. If it's works better for that to be kind of the pathway, and then the course titles can be something different, or if that makes sense to have them be the same. One other thing worth pointing out, I think, is that the mathematics investigating and connecting does attach or align to the categories of investigation, at least terminology-wise, easier. Because, again, it is about investigation. And the connecting sort of comes after you investigate, which is why the sequence is in the fashion we've said too.
Right. Thank you. Bernadette.
I would just like to appreciate how you put it, Dr. Bowler, about the word pathway, because right now it changed my view of the way this framework is now written. So it's actually is giving us the possibility to reframe our thinking from K through 12. This being a pathway for this grade band, building those foundations to the middle school, to high school, and so on and so forth. The only challenge, though, is in high school, our students will still be given a grade for a certain course. That's why if that's going to be named as Mathematics Investigation 1, then there is a dual thinking about what MIC 1, or however you call that, stands for in the high school. But this is a new way for me to look at it from K through 12, which a lot of our math community, including CAPSME and CISC subcommittee, is thinking about how that could be written in the framework. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. And Dr. Bowler.
Yeah, I think it was me who made it confusing, actually, because Brian referred to it as courses, and I was saying pathways. They're both, I mean, at the moment, the way we have it positioned, they're both, that it's a pathway that connects all the way through. And we do have the courses also called those names. So I think we can consider that in the high school chapter as the pathway name, the same as the course name.
Thank you. And Christina?
I just had 2 quick comments. So the first, I think ultimately schools are going to decide what they call their courses at the high school level, because they'll be, creating their course outlines and submitting it. So I think we can discuss that more if it's a course name or a pathway name at the high school level. But I would like to say that I like this new proposal of language. I'm just looking at the chapters. Mathematics for Understanding could be read as we didn't have mathematics for understanding before, where mathematics, investigating, and connecting really seems more asset-based to me. Like, these are things you can do to help make mathematics more rich for students. So I just think it's, to me, seems like more positive language and something actionable for teachers.
Thank you. Dr. Lindeman.
Yeah, just to agree with what Christina had said. It was not meant to imply that understanding can be only achieved with one particular approach or pathway, and that's, I think, what the other name implied more. And we really wanted to kind of get away from that. That's so you picked up on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? And I see no more hands, so we are ready to vote regarding comment 87.
We have consensus.
All right, thank you.
Okay, as Diane said, great work. Great work, and we are ahead of schedule. We were scheduled to have a 10-minute break at 10:25. We'll have a 15-minute break right now. And so please be back. Actually, let me go over the quick overview. We're going to go into small groups at 10:30. So let me come back to the presentation and share that information. So Chapter 7, we're going to go into our small group discussions for Chapter 7 following the break. Again, you're delving deeper into how these State Board approved guidelines are addressed in the chapters, and this is a very opportune moment to make your most substantive changes to the chapters. We will begin with the small groups. The bit.ly, the Google Docs are in the bit.ly already. The link is there. If anybody does not have this link, please send us an email to the Math Framework mailbox, and we will provide you the link so that you don't have to type out all of that whole address. Our groups continue to be the same. And here are the links. If you do not have them yet, please send us an email to the Math Framework mailbox, and we will provide you these links as well. Okay, so we are ready for our break. See you at 10:30 in our small groups.
Welcome back, everyone. We hope that you had a pleasant lunch and perhaps were able to also get some movement in addition to likely answering those emails. We are now ready for our whole group consensus discussion on Chapter 7, grades 6 through 8. And Denise, will you please conduct roll call?
Eddie Spiegler.
Here.
Nina Bradshaw.
Here.
Aaron Fraser.
Here.
Lori Farmus.
Here.
Lori Fury. Lori Fury. Lindsay Gatfield. Crystal Gomez.
Here.
Janet Hollister.
Here.
Lisa Hogerman.
Here.
Stephanie Holloway.
Here.
Andrew Huffaker. Janie Kim. Rebecca Pariso.
Here.
Christina Rubalcava.
Here.
Bernadette Salgarino. Cole Sampson.
Here.
Diane Wilson.
Here.
Lori Fury. Lindsay Gatfield.
Here.
Andrew Huffaker. Janie Kim. Bernadette Salgarino. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So we're going to pull up the consensus document, and you're in the hands of the co-chairs.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for all of your hard work in your small groups. So we'll go ahead and get started with our discussion. We have 9 yellow comments, including 17 that were added. And we have 2 comments with red comments with strike throughs. So those are not we do not need to discuss those. Okay, so we'll start with comment number 1. It's my comment. I think this, I can just explain what I was thinking is there was lots of conversation around the COIs, but I wasn't exactly sure where someone would go to find the standards. I believe the writer said there would be an appendix for this, or even just a link was all I was looking for. So that was my idea behind that is so that the frameworks is a one-stop shop, that teachers don't have to go somewhere else to find the standards that they should be using, that it was all together. So any other comments, Lindsay?
We had just highlighted this in our group because we wanted to make sure that that was happening for all 3 chapters then, if it's happening for this grade level.
Okay, so do we want to go ahead? Maybe we could add to the bottom of this, please ensure this happens for all 3 grade level chapters. And I believe I probably said the same thing at the high school comments as well. If I didn't, I meant to. Okay. Any other conversation around this?
Laurie Constantino here. Maybe if we could just modify grade level chapters to grade banded chapters, just to be consistent with the fact that they're grade bands.
Yes, thank you. And the first sentence as well. It says per the end of the first sentence. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, Dr. Lindeman?
There's a pretty big difference page-wise between a link and an appendix here of all these standards. So if I'm reading this consensus comment right, or if this was to come to consensus back, would it be then writer's discretion between whether it's a link or whether it's an appendix, and then applying that similarly to the other 2? That's my...
Okay. I'm kind of open on that, I'll be honest. But does someone else have a preference? Janet?
I'd say that I have a preference for a link rather than an appendix.
Okay.
Just because of the page count, I think that the pages will be better served with additional commentary.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca?
I was going to just say I agree.
Okay. Dr. Lindeman?
And then just one other sort of question about that is, this would, if the decision would be to go to appendix only, it's really not an appendix, it's an addendum to a chapter, really, right? I mean, it's not an appendix is sort of its own standalone chapter at the end of the document. This was meant to be either a link at the end of the chapter or listing all the standards at the end of the chapter. So it's an appendix to a chapter.
Right, and I couldn't remember if we had discussed this. I remember us having some discussion around it the first time we read the chapters, but I couldn't remember what exactly we had come to an agreement on. But I'm fine if you want to take out or appendix and just leave link. I'm fine with that. So Yeah. Okay, any other comments around this? Okay, if we could go ahead and vote.
We have 14 yes and 1 I can live with it. It looks like we have 1 vote outstanding from Andrew Huffiger, if he's online.
Okay, we have consensus.
Okay. That takes us down to comment number 4. Any discussion around this one? Okay, Cole?
So I'm not really too passionate about this either way. I was, for consistency purposes, at the end of the TK5 chapter, like pages 87 to 99, were kind of the introduction overviews taken from the last framework. And so either making that similar across the chapters or removing it from the first framework, whatever makes the most sense to the team.
Okay, Erin?
I was just going to say number 5 that's already passed has a similar thing.
Okay, thank you. All right, so any other comments? Okay, so we need to go ahead and vote. So we're voting on comment number 4.
We have 6 yes, 3 no, and 6 I can live with it.
Can you repeat the vote, Shauna? 6 yes?
6 yes, 3 no, and 6 I can live with it.
It meets the standard, the threshold for consensus.
All right, moving right along to comment number 6. Janet?
So this is my comment, and I would like to withdraw it because in my group we discussed it a lot, and then we rewrote a tier 4 comment that is a little clearer and more specific.
Okay. Any objections to it being withdrawn? Okay, perfect. So we'll go ahead and withdraw that comment, and we'll move on to the next one. All right, so we're on comment number 11. Okay, Janet?
So this is my comment, and I probably was too specific in terms of adding a sidebar, but I think that the authentic sidebar is talking about authentic mathematically, but we also really need to consider the culturally relevant. And so if folks want to amend it to not be a sidebar, but near that conversation of authentic, we need it to also be culturally relevant. We need a discussion of culturally relevant.
Okay. All right. Any other conversation? All right. If we could go ahead and vote then.
Does it need to be modified? I'm sorry, Laurie, just a clarification question. Does it need to be modified based on Janet's comment?
Let me ask Janet. Janet, do you feel that what you said modifies that comment?
I think that it would be helpful to take the sidebar out of it and just add some comment so that there's or writer's discretion or something. It doesn't need to be a sidebar, but it in relation to authentic tasks, there needs to be a discussion of authenticity through the lens of being culturally relevant.
Okay. And I would agree with, I agreed with that. We throw around a lot of words. We just need to make sure we all have the same definition of them.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that being said, whether or not it's a sidebar, it's going to be a writer's discretion. So if we could go ahead and vote, make sure you're voting on this.
We have 13 yes and 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, where takes us to number 12. Any discussion? All right, Diane?
This was only highlighted to correct the line numbers. I think instead of 997, it was supposed to be 99.
Okay. Okay. Cole, I believe this is your comment. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So then if we could go ahead and vote on this.
We have 15 yes.
Consensus.
Okay. That takes us down to number 13. Any discussion around number 13? Cole?
So I know that in our group we kind of talked about that when teachers will be doing the backwards mapping in that vignette we suggested in the last chapter, they'll be able to address some of the common misconceptions. But thinking through just kind of helping teachers kind of anticipate where kids may have some barriers might be useful in this. We're kind of trying to get them to resources to kind of, I think that also brings clarity to these COIs. We're kind of thinking of some of this as well.
Okay, Erin?
So it goes along with the discussion. The reason we had highlighted it is because we had that discussion for the last chapter, but it looks like in Delta number 40 that this is better explained down there to go with what we talked about in the last chapter.
Okay. All right. Cole?
Yeah, and so I think number 40 specifically addresses like the vignette we'll put at the very in like the introductory chapter or in that like early on to refer back to. I guess the question is that enough for one grade level vignette where we're kind of unpacking it this way, or do we want kind of some thoughts and guidance around misconceptions for all these categories as we're building them out?
Okay, Janet?
So what I was wondering is whether the misconceptions was something that we had missed out of the comment 40 that we wanted to add in as just an additional feature to highlight. So I just didn't know if there's some merging to make sure that idea comes forward.
Cole, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I definitely think whenever I think backwards design, that anticipating misconceptions is part of that process. And so that's fine. I just was proposing that thought because I knew it was one of the guidelines that hasn't really been talked about from my perspective very much throughout yet. And so I just want to bring that to everyone's attention.
So let me ask Cole, I understand. So I think, let me just see if I'm hearing you correctly. So I understand that we're talking about in comment number 40, the backwards mapping and the UDL, which encompasses all this. But that's more about a vignette on the development of a COI. Whereas you're meaning even in the narrative when they're talking about COIs that the examples they kind of give, the narrative, you'd also like for them, not just in the vignette we've discussed, but throughout those COIs to include that conversation. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is my thinking. Now I know that adds a lot of text here too, so I'm kind of cautious of number of pages and things like that. But how I interpreted guideline 3.2, that is a piece that needs to be there.
Okay. Okay. All righty. Any other comments on this one? Okay, so we need to go ahead and vote.
We have 13 yes and 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay. Look at us all the way down to 22. So Cole, I believe this is yours again if you'd like to go ahead and speak.
Yeah, we were going to actually strike this out in our group because we felt like it was addressed last time. We just didn't know how to do that without having to talk about it in this session. So I'm good to withdraw it unless somebody has an objection.
Okay. Any objections to withdrawing comment number 22? Okay, Christina?
Sorry, it's not an objection. I just wanted to let the group know that in our group, we actually copied the language that we developed, the specific language, to our tier 4. So it has those examples and everything in it.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're moving on. 26. Okay. Anyone like to comment on this? Okay, Lori?
I remember hearing from the writers that there's some instances where specifics don't apply, that the standard or the specific content is kind of a more broad idea, and so to be requesting some specific grade level content standards for that may kind of change the idea of what's going on in the vignette.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else like to speak to it? Okay, Janet?
I think we need to be really clear when we're doing vignettes what course this is occurring in, and we need to make sure that we're providing teachers guidance with appropriate grade level content. If it dips into lower grade levels to provide access and support students with unfinished learning, then that's awesome. But if we provide sort of generic, unless there's a discussion of, I don't know why you would have 8th grade content in a 5th grade class. I don't know why I do know why you'd have 5th grade content in an 8th grade class. That's a really broad span. So I think that there needs to be more clarity when we do vignettes. What classroom is this happening in?
Okay, thank you. With that being said, would anyone else like to speak? All right, so if we could go ahead and vote.
We have 6 yes, 4 no, and 5 I can live with it.
It meets the threshold. Consensus.
Okay. So moving on to comment number 28. Cole, I know this was your comment as well, and we discussed it. Would you like to talk or speak to it?
Yeah. So the reason I was just suggesting moving that section of tracking acceleration, moving it up, is because at the end of line 222, it is kind of leading into the discussion about investigations of categories, and then we talk about tracking acceleration, and then after that we talk about categories of investigation. So it felt like this was kind of just dropped in the wrong place. So thinking about moving it up, making that more at the forefront, and then going through the different categories.
Okay.
My thinking.
All right, perfect, thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this? Okay, seeing no hands, if we could go ahead and vote.
We have 13 yes, and 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, so that brings us down to our tier 4. So we'll start with Alpha Group. So again, just as Diane said, I'll pause for a moment so everybody can read, and then we'll go ahead and I'll ask for speakers. And if you want to speak, just go ahead and raise your hand immediately. No need to wait for that. Okay, Erin?
So I had added this in. This was one of mine that didn't get put in. So basically, it reads that U-Cubed offers data visualizations, including many appropriate for elementary grades. And I just thought that kind of stood out in this chapter because it is a middle school grade band chapter. And I know that those data visualizations are actually from K-12. And so I had just suggested that we're referring to the middle school in the middle school chapter, or referring to all of them, that's fine. But the fact that it refers only to elementary seemed odd to me.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. All right, any other speakers? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote.
We have 12 yes, 2 no, and 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay, to number 35. Okay, Christina, and then Janet.
I just wanted to mention that Beta Group has a really similar comment. We actually took some language that Dr. Lindemann shared with us around the specifics that they were going to include in vignettes. So it has a little more detail, but they're very similar comments. It is right 41. So for vignettes, and it has the list of things there. That was all things that the writing team had discussed for vignettes.
Okay. All right, Erin.
So this was my comment. I moved to strike it because of 41. It is better laid out.
Okay, perfect. Any objections to withdrawing comment 35? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to comment number 36. Okay, this was from the Californians Together public comment. Any speakers? Okay, Cole?
I believe this is the same one that we were talking about, Lori, in our group. And we had one addition to this comment, and it was talking about if we were going to add that vignette to make it tie into the environmental principles, because that was evident and missing in this chapter. And that way there could be an example in each.
Yes, and that's our comment number 49. 49, thank you. So maybe if everybody we can look at 49 for just a moment. So they're the same, except for our recommendation was to use the environmental principles in this vignette, since there was one at every other grade level, as Cole pointed out.
So I moved to strike the one from Alpha because this just adds a little bit. Let's leave the one from Delta in.
Okay. Any objections from anyone else in Alpha Group or anyone else in general that would to strike that comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and strike 36 and move on to 37. If you'd like to speak, go ahead and raise your hand. I can see people reading, so I'll give everybody a moment more. Okay, any speakers? We'll go ahead and vote.
We're waiting on one more vote. Okay, 15 yes.
Consensus.
Okay. Would it be okay at this time if I go ahead and with strike 47, since it's the same comment?
Yes, no problem.
Okay, so we'll strike 47.
Lori, this is Christina. I think Beta Group also has the same comment. I don't know what number it is because I couldn't see it.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just knew we had, so I knew we were looking.
I don't see it.
I don't see it. I think.
No, I'm not seeing it either.
Okay.
It's number 43.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
thank you.
42 and 43 have been taken care of.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and take out 42 and 43.
And 48 also, the structure of the vignettes.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and take out 48 as well, because we talked about those. If anybody objects, please throw your hand up and then 49 as well. Oh no, 49 we're keeping. Never mind. 49 we're keeping. We're keeping 49. Okay. So we'll go back to where we were. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Number 38. Okay, Janet.
We had actually a long conversation about this. This is the one we took out based on the comment that I had made about the acceleration section. And we're hoping that there could be a section that is added on how to support students with unfinished learning. We pulled up the Achieve the Core math intervention strategies. There's a whole series of 5 blog posts talking about that. And I think that Crystal sent something to the math framework mailbox that shows sort of a table of common missteps that people do with interventions. I don't know if that
is correct.
So there you go. There you go. Looks like that. And so in this section, we would like to propose a section to address unfinished learning and positive ways to deal with that. And I said it just for this 6-8 section, and other people thought it might be something that's useful in other sections as well. Other grade band. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Crystal?
I also followed up to the same email where we got this on Achieve the Core so that we could refer back to it, or that the writers could get a hold of that much easier if we agree to it.
Okay. Ben?
Yeah, I was just wondering if the Teaching for Equity and Access chapter is the right place to put this, because that's across all.
Those of you who are recommending that, what do you think with that suggestion? Okay, Lindsay?
It did come up in our group as we were discussing this and Janet was writing it out, that it is important to each grade level span and it wouldn't just be this chapter. So that's not a bad idea to put it in that chapter unless we're going to repeat it in each of those 3.
That's true. Janet?
So I think that it's a good idea to put it in that chapter. And I wonder if there's really specific areas to highlight within each grade band of things to attend to. So you have your general comments and some of the work from Achieve the Core, because the Achieve the Core work is talking about K through high school types of situations. But I do think in each grade band, there's specific things to be attending to.
Okay, so let me just ask this, and please jump in if I'm saying this wrong. So the comment, this table, we'd recommend in the engaging.
The Access and Equity chapter.
Yeah, the Access and Equity chapter. Thank you.
It would be chapter 2, by the way. Yeah, sorry, chapter 2, by the way.
Chapter 2, okay. And but you would still like to see some of this addressed within the grade band chapters, is that correct?
Yes, so I think possibly it's going to be a section. I think it's equity and engagement is what the chapter is called. So I think that it can be a section or whatever in the access in the equity and engagement. It doesn't have to be a section, but it needs to be addressed.
Okay, so you're asking. So okay. I'll let some other people go, and then I'm trying to just summarize all the thoughts. So I'm thinking, the chart goes there, and then it's addressed in grade band. But I'll go ahead and let Stephanie, and then Lena.
So I hope it's not going too far off. But this is something that we also need to think about in the instructional materials chapter, because oftentimes we get our curriculum and then the intervention is looked at like an afterthought and it's not embedded within. and it's basically just reteaching concepts versus looking at the progression and where the students are at within the progression. So I don't know if that's the time to mention this or if we parking lot that for later, but that's if we're going to have it in various places, one of them would be a good place in addition to the access and equity. That's just my thoughts.
Constantina, what do you think? Should Stephanie maybe write that down and make it a comment when we visit instructional materials? Can we add it here?
You can, but I think that I don't see why you couldn't modify the recommendation to include that,
Okay.
to include both chapters. Chapter 2, which is teaching for equity and engagement. I see that just to get the chapter title right. Chapter 2, teaching for equity and engagement. And if you also want to recommend chapter 12, instructional materials, that would be just fine.
Okay. So can we change it where it says in chapter 2, put chapter 2 and chapter 12? Stephanie, will that work for you?
That works for me. I just want to make sure that's something that you all agree upon and it's not just my personal push.
Okay. All right, Janet?
So if I'm going to wordsmith this, yes, I would say add information on addressing unfinished learning. And then we could say, just to try to put it in some type of order,
Sorry, Janet. So you want to remove in each grade banded chapter?
Yeah, because I think we can parse it out in bullet points. So add information on addressing unfinished learning. And then you can get rid of that or students functioning below. But so add information on addressing unfinished learning. And then it's in chapter 2, it would be sort of general guidance.
So maybe just parenthetical after chapter 2, just parenthetical general guidance.
Right.
Okay.
In grade bands,
comma,
in grade band chapters, it would be content specific to those grade bands. And then in chapter 12, it would be, I don't know, Stephanie, this is where you could add something on instructional materials in chapter 12.
Rebecca, I'm sorry, Jen, I didn't mean to interrupt. Rebecca, I just wanted you to know I do see your hand.
And then the other thing, so there's the table, but there's a series of blog posts from Achieve the Core that are a great reference. I didn't have the link to be able to put it in there. But I think we flesh it out that way, and I'll let Rebecca go.
Okay.
Okay, well, this just kind of occurred to me, so I'm still trying to work through the ideas in my head, but I'm just thinking about, RTI, response to intervention, and I wonder in this particular case if we can clearly model how a teacher can bring those skills of unfinished learning into the next content standards. So, show how you could weave that unfinished learning into the new standards. So you're technically including that and building on it more instead of just, isolating it, going back to just that one particular thing.
Okay. All right, Christina?
My office has created some, we're calling them assessments, but they're really more just like diagnostic practice that is tied in with a particular grade level standard to look for learning that leads right up to it. So you can diagnose what students are doing, provide feedback, and then it has some like next steps. I can submit that through the mailbox as a potential resource or reference that might be helpful to teachers, because it's exactly what you guys are talking about. How do you act on it in the next standard, and ways to address it that aren't just the unproductive practices.
Okay. So I'm just going to ask because I'm not sure. So could we put that underneath this, additional resources to be provided in the mailbox? Okay. And Janet, I'm sorry, I certainly didn't mean to cut you off if you were not done speaking.
No, thank you. This is so much better than what I could do by myself.
All right. So Rebecca, is it capturing sort of what you, with the resources that Christina just talked about, does that sort of bring into picture what your concern was?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were, not teaching in isolation, remedial skills in isolation.
Yes, definitely. Okay. All right, Cole?
I actually think that the way this is written better captures what we were trying to get to with the misconceptions before. And so maybe striking that comment we already agreed on and leaving this as is, that gives some discretion there.
Okay.
Just throwing that out there to the group.
All right. Well, let's do this. Let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and, if there's no more comment on this, we'll go ahead and vote on this, and then we'll scroll back up to that comment and we'll deal with that one. So 38, take a second to read it. We've wordsmithed it as much as possible, hopefully. All right, and let's go ahead and vote.
Yes.
Consensus.
All right, so going back to what Paul said, going back up to number 13. Okay. So Cole, is your recommendation to withdraw this comment now, or do you just want to leave it?
Well, I mean, I just think that it was much better captured in what we just said, much more clear. And so either way, I just was making an observation. And so I'm good striking it or leaving it, whatever's easiest. But
you know what, since we've already voted on it, what if we just put, could we maybe just add to it, see comment 38 for further clarification?
Yeah,
yeah. Is that doable, Constantino?
Yes,
I don't know what the rules are.
Yeah, if
okay, I don't want to break any. Okay, perfect. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to our next tier 4 comment.
And Lori?
Okay.
These are just these have already been approved in the previous chapter. These are just sort of reminders here that they also apply to this chapter. So these have already been turned green approved previously. Yep.
Okay. Perfect. So 39 should be green and 40 should be green.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. And then 41, we have spoken about it. I don't know if anybody has additional comments. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands. So if we want to go ahead and vote on 41.
We have 15 yes.
Okay, consensus. And moving on to 42. And I believe 44 and 45 have already been addressed up above. Is that correct? Someone? Is that correct? Correct. Those were the guidance chapter ones.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's correct. Okay. So then we can go ahead and strike through 44 and 45. Okay. So 46 was from our group, and it was brought up that while it was mentioned specifically in this group, in the middle school band chapter, to include a reference to the progression documents, that our group, the Delta group, felt that we should have the progression documents at least referenced in all the grade banded chapters. And so that's what this is, like an expansion of comment number 2. Would anyone else like to speak to that?
Got it.
Okay. Right. So seeing no hands, if we could go ahead and vote.
We have 15 yes.
Consensus.
Okay, so 49 is a vignette with the EP&Cs. We've discussed, but I'm certainly, if anybody else would like to speak, please raise your hand. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands, so we'll go ahead and vote.
We have 14 yes and 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Okay. And that takes us to comment 50. Would anyone like to speak to this? Okay, seeing no hands, let's go ahead and vote.
We're at 14 yes. We're just waiting on one more vote from Stephanie, if she's online. 15 yes.
Okay, consensus.
Okay, and I think that is the last comment. So we are done with this comment. These comments for our middle school band, our 6 to 8 band.
Great work again, committee members. Thank you, Lori. Let me come back to our presentation. We're ahead of schedule once again. And what we will do now, our next activity is the small group breakout for Chapter 8. And what we'll do is we'll take a 12-minute break. Please come back to small groups at 1:30. Let me give the instructions for that. Okay. We will now go into our whole group discussion for Chapter 8, the grade-banded chapter for the high school grades. Just an announcement, we are scheduled to have public comment at 3:30, so we will take a break from our whole group discussion to have public comment at the scheduled time. So with that, I will turn it over to our co-chairs and project the Google Doc. I believe we're back to Diane.
All right. Thank you very much. So it says we have 16 comments highlighted yellow and 33 comments that were added to Tier 4. There's one comment that's highlighted with red with a stripe through, which means we do not need to discuss it. So we will begin with the yellow comments, starting with number 1. Is there anyone who wants to speak to that one? Lori.
It was a conversation. It actually was in many of the comments. Maybe some of them said it more clearly. As I read it, I became confused about, was there a difference between, and I think they're called MICs now, or mixed. Were they different from the integrated series? Were they the same? And I know that at one point, there was a writer in our group, and he talked about the word implementation of them, but I think it's not super clear on their connection, and it appears when I first read it that there is no longer this integrated pathway, but then the traditional one is very clearly called out. And I think my fear was that if it's not very clear, that when districts, readopt materials and redecide on course curriculum and course pathways, that the default of traditional will be very alluring. And that was my idea. It's just, I just think that we need to be very clear about the connection between those two.
And Lori, I had two comments that were along this same line also, and so I'm wondering if comments 10, 12, and 18, which are going forward, speak to number one, or would you still like us to consider number one?
I'm okay withdrawing it based on those other comments.
All right, thank you. And comment, okay. Oh, is there any objection to withdrawing comment one? All right, we see none. So comment one is withdrawn, and comment two. Lori.
This again, just, you know, the problems that were there were very rich, but if I'm reading this as a teacher, I didn't know when that problem would be introduced. Would it be introduced as like a need to, I don't know, for lack of a better word, need to learn problem, so that the problem is put out there and they need to learn the mathematics to do the problem? Is it taught along with the unit? Is the problem like a summative type of problem for the end of their learning? I just wasn't sure when they thought it was appropriate to introduce those problems.
Thank you. And Christina?
I was just going to say that this comment is very similar to comment 24. 24 has a little more detail in it, but it's the same idea. So, you know, when we're talking about the things we want included in the vignette, and the goal is part of them, also, you know, placement within instruction. Is this, you know, to surface student thinking? Is it more this vignette talking about more formative assessment? Is this vignette, you know, application would be nice. But I just felt like 24 had a little more detail.
It does, so I'm okay with drawing it.
All right. Is there any objection to comment 2 being withdrawn? All right, so comment 2 is withdrawn, and comment 3? Lori?
I think we just need, the one, I would amend it to take off the word appendix and just use the link. We kind of had discussed this in the middle school, in the 6-8 band, that there would be a link to what standards would fall in what course. So I would definitely take off appendix and link and use the link. But I would like for teachers to be able to click from the chapter and see the breakdown for themselves.
Okay. Any other comment? There are no hands, so let's vote on comment 3.
Yes.
Consensus?
All right, and comments 5 and 6 are both mine, and I feel like other people did a much more eloquent job of explaining what I meant, and so I am willing to withdraw 5 and 6 unless there is objection to that. All right, seeing no hands, so 5 and 6 are withdrawn. Comment 7. Anyone who wishes to speak to that one? I see no hands. So can we please vote on comment 7?
Yes.
Consensus?
Comment 9. Anyone who wishes to speak to this one? Christina?
I would just say that 9 is really similar to 22. 22 has a little more justification to why that needs to happen.
And 22 is moving forward. And
so is 12. It's very similar to 12. That's already moving forward.
All right.
We can remove that.
Okay, so Cole has offered to withdraw that comment. Is there any objection? All right, so comment 9 is withdrawn. And on down to comment 15. Anyone who wishes to speak to this one? Aaron.
I was just hoping for some clarification. I know that I was the one who highlighted this one in our group that brought this one up. And I just wasn't sure what is being asked for in this piece, because it just seems it's the start of line 593. Does the paragraph about modeling fit here? And then line 721 as the image of the modeling cycle. I'm wondering if there's something missing from that. I'm not sure what is being asked here. So I just wanted some clarification.
I think I may have a wrong. It's Lori. So I may have a wrong line. As I was reading it, and I read it like 3 times, like with the modeling paragraph right there. I kept wondering if it actually made sense right there. I can double check my line number on 721. If you give us a second, I will double check.
All right, we'll give you a second to check that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it was just, I don't know. It was weird because the image for the modeling diagram was separate. That's right. The image for the modeling diagram was separated from the paragraph that explained modeling. So it just seemed disjointed to me. Like, it just didn't seem to fit. I mean, I'm not married to it. It just didn't seem to fit for me.
So I'm thinking, though, that the paragraph you're referring to, though, is part of the vignette. So it's part of this problem about they're instructed to work in groups and they're working on the drone light show. So that paragraph is specific to that vignette, and then the modeling stuff comes after the vignette. So that's where I was confused.
And let's see. Aaron, you just had your hand up, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just happy to withdraw it. It's fine.
Oh, okay.
If I read it differently than other people and more people are okay with it, I'm fine just to withdraw it.
Okay. Is there any objection to comment 15 being withdrawn? All right. No objections noted. So 15 is withdrawn. And we're on number 19. Janet.
So this is a resource that I highlighted yesterday, in that it has a lot of great stuff that we're already talking about. And just, I was noticing in the elementary, there was a section on why math for understanding, and it launched in just with some great narrative about why we're doing this. And I know it has a different name now. But it just felt like in high school, really explaining what we're trying to do. I think that's one of the things that we're grappling with, is why do we have this frame of math for understanding or math for whatever it is these days. So I was thinking, add that language around why we're doing this, why we have this title, and then using some of the UC competencies, because it is describing what this framework is trying to do.
Thank you. And Christina?
So I agree. The only reason my group highlighted this was because we just wanted to make that correction of the title so that it matches with the new title of the pathways. That was literally, we were like, this is all great, but should it say Math for Understanding or the new title? So
I think they'll figure it out, but you can modify as needed. Yeah.
All right. So Christina, do we want to modify it, or do we just want to let the writers make the change?
I think based on our discussion, they'll know what we're talking about.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on 19? Okay, please vote on 19.
Yes.
Consensus.
And we're on comment 21. Christina.
So this was mine, and I just was thinking, because of the way it was listed with really just the domains and not even the clusters, that there needed to be more detail. But I think there's other comments that have taken care of this. And we've also said include a link to the standards for each course. So I can withdraw this one.
All right, thank you. Is there any objection to comment 21 being withdrawn? There are no hands, so 21 is withdrawn, and we'll move on to 23. And this, Christina?
So this one was mine as well, and I can withdraw it. I think we've talked about the goals being included in the vignettes. We've already had that discussion, so I don't think we need this comment.
All right, thank you. Any objection to 23 being withdrawn? All right, then we will move to comment 27. Erin.
So Rosa did mention yesterday, after the writers had brought up the idea of the course, the name change for the title, that she said she had brought this up in the high school comments, and they would be obsolete based on the whole discussion about changing the name anyway.
Okay.
But our group did talk about this, though, the last part. Perhaps the use of traditional may not be clear after the last round of retooling algebra to geo. In any case, it'd be great to emphasize either pathway requires deeper understanding than pre-Common Core math era courses. So we had talked about that most of this was obsolete, but that part at the end, we were like, we weren't sure we wanted to take out the whole thing.
And Christina?
We had that come up too, but I went back and reread on page 57. And we actually, the last round we saw this chapter, added something in there that although the name says traditional, it's not traditional in its implementation. There should be active engagement, such as in the Math for Understanding pathway. So I think that comment is taken care of on page 57.
All right, thank you. Cole?
So this goes right in line with my comment 44 as well. And they're both highlighted. And then proposing, like, instead of calling it the traditional pathway, to maybe change it. It doesn't have to be like non-integrated, but I think when I hear traditional, I also think traditional ways of teaching. And I think that was, at least in my area, was a really hard transition to convince them to go, even though we know it means algebra, geometry, algebra 2. So giving it a new name and making it feel like, regardless of what pathway you're taking, the teaching has changed in that is kind of where I was thinking. And I think it kind of goes right in line with Rose's comment here. So
thank you. And Erin?
So this may be a can of worms. We had a large discussion about this in our group based on Cole's comment in 40, and then we also added 46 that kind of goes in line with that. But we did have a large discussion about this, that but some history from the 2013 framework. The framework committee in 2013 did ask to have the course names changed from the traditional Algebra 1 geometry, Algebra 2, because of this idea that it's promoting a message that nothing's changing. It's the same thing I've always done, that teacher who's been teaching for 20 years can pull out those worksheets and those, stand in front and deliver, I see, I do, you do, we do things and go with it. And that was shot down by CDE because of the political climate, and the idea that it would cost publishers money. However, I'd like to go back to my statement that I said in the last meeting when we were talking about instructional resources chapter. If we know that there is a need for change and we want to really promote that change and push for that change, this is where we need to do it. And if we're just going to keep doing the exact same thing we've been doing year after year after year, the changes are not going to happen, and we're going to be in the same place 7 to 10 years from now. So again, that whole idea of the name change, and I know that there's some politics behind that. However, there is a precedent, and we added this because in 46, in the science framework, the NGSS framework, it does name the chapter Preferred Integrated, which notes that that is their preferred pathway. And it does have the other one also, but it's kind of as a second thought. And so, again, I think that now is the time that we can make these changes. And if the majority of the committee and all the experts in the room believe that this needs to happen, then this is where it needs to happen, and we need to move this forward.
Thank you. And Janet?
So one of my hopes for Math for Understanding, or MIC, or whatever it is that that's really going to highlight the need for a change in instruction from these big ideas and weaving these other areas of math in, or I'm still trying to figure out categories of instruction, investigation. And I want to be really careful about, I think that traditional is problematic. And we talked about that, because it's not that it is traditional as in old school or whatever, but it's something about the way that the math is organized. We could not, in our small group, come up with a better name, aside from separated or isolated, neither which was acceptable, to describe the way that the math was either integrated or something else. But we have to be respectful of districts that choose to go algebra, geometry, algebra, and offer them guidance for shifting up their instruction. And that's really what I'm hoping that MIC, the Math for Understanding, all of those things can be used in either pathway.
Hi, this is Shanine. So thank you for your keen comments on this. I know that it came up in actually a couple of the small groups. And I think you're raising some really great points. So let me read the State Board guideline, and then I'll kind of qualify some statements from there. So guideline 4E says the CFCC will address the issues related to mathematics instruction in grades 8 and beyond, including E, suggested courses for both the traditional parentheses algebra, geometry, algebra 2 in parentheses, and integrated parentheses integrated math 1, 2, 3 in parentheses high school mathematics pathways. The content of these courses shall be the same regardless of the grade level at which they are taught, and applicable to and supportive of non-traditional instruction and learning. So that's our foundation. But with that, I'll say the CFCC has made recommendations. They took the writer's recommendation, for example, to change the Math for Understanding, the naming of the pathway. I don't think there's an issue with changing the naming of the traditional pathway, as we have described it thoroughly, I believe, in my opinion, in the document. It is, but we would not recommend changing and to show preference of one or the other. So a name change, I think the CFCC can deliberate if there's a specific name change that you think is better than traditional, but it would not be one that indicates preference.
Thank you. Lena?
I'm also wondering, just based on, what are we saying between integrated and Math for Understanding pathways, and asking for more clarification there. I'm also wondering if at some point, could we possibly have in here vignettes, like here's what it would look like in a 9th grade level course in Algebra 1, Integrated 1, and Math for Understanding 1, because there is a significant difference. And while I understand, we do need to have changes occur, I'm wondering if putting the vignettes together, here's what it would look like across the 3 courses, or the 3 course designation pathways. I'm wondering if that would also help and show the differences, because looking at the traditional pathway vignettes, very different from the other ones. So, and if people are still looking, we still have to reference CAST, and I'm not saying we should teach to a test, but if that's what districts are also looking at, this may be helpful for districts to take a good look at what they're doing in all these courses as well.
All right, thank you. And Erin? Oh, you're muted.
Kind of piggybacking off of a couple people there, but one of the things that really I think that the idea, first of all, about the separating the integrated versus the MIC courses, and I think that that's been answered better in the chapter in this draft than it was in the last one. That integrated actually has been, because in the last one it was significantly missing, and now the authors have addressed that a little bit and they've put it in. But the whole idea, and we discussed this the last time we discussed this, was that the integrated was a stab and not quite where we want to be yet. And so the MIC is kind of replacing the integrated pathway in a more coherent, the categories of investigation. So it's a different way of approaching the same pathway. The traditional, again, is separated, but I think that one of the other things, we have that Algebra 1 geometry, Algebra 2, the geometry sandwich, but really, if you think about it, based on the way the chapter's laid out with the high school, the additional high school courses, and the new guidance from UCOP with the junior and senior level courses that are going to be accepted and the admissions stuff, that there's branching out, that really it's the 9th and 10th grade that we want to have that the standard things that every student gets in high school, and that meets minimum graduation requirements. Well, in the integrated, you have the function, so it's the same standards for Algebra 1 geometry as it is for integrated 1-2. Like, there is just 2 years, it's the way they're packaged. So I almost think that we really need to consider that if we're bringing forth these other ideas for branching out in the junior and senior years for students to be able to have a little bit more flexibility based on the new guidelines and the new research, that really we're focused on 9th grade, year 1 and 2 in the traditional, and 9th grade, year 1 and 2 in the integrated, which would be the MIC courses for 1 and 2. And I don't know how we can kind of put this all together, because it's a way to, but that's one of the things that as I've been listening to the conversation about really fleshing out integrated versus MIC, they're the same thing. It's a different way of approaching it in moving forward, what we want it to see in the integrated pathway, which I understand now, because I was one of those that was very upset the last time. And I think the authors have done a better job this time around in making that clearer.
All right, thank you. And then we'll take Dr. Bowler's comment, and then probably a couple of more, and then we have to break for public comment. So Dr. Bowler, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Shanine clarification about not offering any preference to the pathways. And you said that different names were okay. And as Erin mentioned, the science framework has a very clear name, which is Preferred Integrated Course Model for grades 6 through 8. And then the other one has a different name. So I'm assuming we can do the same in maths as the science people were able to do and call ours a preferred connected or whatever we decide to call it. So that was a point of clarification. On the adding vignettes for all these different pathways, one of the reasons we wanted to move away from the older integrated pathway is that many publishers really didn't integrate any content at all. They just interspersed algebra and geometry chapters. So a vignette for that pathway would look exactly the same probably as the algebra geometry pathway. There's separate algebra problems and separate geometry problems. And we could put some of those in. I don't think putting them into two different pathways is really helpful, but as Erin said, the newer integrated pathway we've put out is an attempt to actually make the content be integrated, and we've fleshed that out with vignettes so people can understand it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bowler. My understanding, and I wasn't here during the time of science, but I have heard a lot about it. So my understanding is that was actually built into the guidelines at that time. done a bit of research and spoken with Member Rucker on this point, and so that's my understanding. So it's not built into our guidelines for math.
All right, thank you. And we're at 3:28, and it sounds like maybe we have some work to do, that maybe there are some different comments that need to be generated that we can vote on based on this discussion that may or may not have anything to do with comment 27. So do we want to go to public comment before we start trying to craft more suggestions?
Well, we can start public comment after 3:30. It doesn't have to be right at 3:30. If you feel that maybe you can continue the discussion and reach some agreements here, and a few minutes later, then we can go to public comment, then that would be okay.
All right. So some of the different ideas that were brought up, has anyone had a chance to think about how they might want that phrased as a comment? Christina.
I would almost propose that we, vote on 27 as is, but then we use comment, just because there's so much language there that I feel like that would be a challenge to wordsmith it. But I know Cole mentioned there was another comment later on. I think it was 44, where it actually goes to that issue, change traditional to non-integrated. I think we would have an easier time wordsmithing that comment just because it's simpler.
All right, that sounds like a good idea to me. Thank you. All right, so I think we are ready to vote on 27, but someone made the comment that it's really just the last part of the comment. So is there anything that needs to be struck from this? I think it was the last piece of it, right? So is there any objection? So you can see the part that's highlighted right now. Is there any objection to striking the beginning part of that comment so that we are only left with the highlighted portion? And I see no hands. So we will strike this part. And then we're voting only on the remaining part of number 27. And if you would vote now, please.
Wait, can I clarify something really quick?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm confused because I think it was Aaron just mentioned about comment 44. So I know that we want to change the name, but are you guys voting for both of those to go through to the writer, or are we just going to have one?
I think the part that is going forward is it would be great to emphasize that either pathway requires a deeper understanding than pre-CCSS Math Era high school courses. And then in comment 44, I think it was, is where we'll talk about the name change. Does that help?
So do we need to strike out perhaps that line?
Yeah, strike out one more sentence.
But I have another question, because the emphasize that either pathway requires a deeper understanding, because this was actually asked of the writers in the last round, and it does better. I mean, there is a paragraph. I think Christina brought it up on page 57 or something. How it does actually say that it is not. That it does require some shifts in instruction and how the kids relate to the material. I think that might already be there. Maybe I'm wrong, Christina?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying.
All right, so if we could clear the votes, and then Janet, you had a comment?
Sorry, I just think that writing it in one place is not sufficient, and so I think that it's a good comment to go forward to see if there's other ways that it can be highlighted and made clear that the depth is required.
All right, thank you. Any other comments before we vote on the remaining piece? Dr. Lindeman.
Just a comment here that I guess it might be worth clarifying because we're talking about these names, traditional, that what does that mean when we say traditional? That's actually in the standards. Traditional, it's what it's called there. We didn't invent it. It's called the traditional pathway. So clarifying that as opposed to actually what Shanine had showed us from the guidelines clarifies that there's a difference between the traditional pathway and traditional instruction. So, because it talks about non-traditional instruction. So there might be more language to add there to the traditional pathway to make sure that it's clear that we're talking about traditional in terms of how the standards are arranged. That's one thing. But then it's a separate thing to talk about traditional instruction as something we are getting away from writ large. And so that you might consider that as well. I don't know if that was in this comment or in a later comment. The last comment is that I guess I want to make. Sorry, one other thing is that we're doing our best with the high school chapter. It's a difficult, complex chapter and sets of guidelines and things to sort through. And so we would like to infuse as much things as possible, but we do have limited time. And so when we are, thinking about investigating and connecting as really something new and novel and based in research and so on and so forth, we would like to put as much effort as we can into making that coherent as opposed to spending the limited time, and time is a resource here for us, is in shaping and reshaping things which may or may not live after in some of the other places. I just wanted to point that out. This is some of the difficult balancing that I guess I'm doing as managing the writing team.
Thank you. And any additional comment on what is not removed from comment 27? Erin?
So can we just put in there then what Dr. Lindemann had just said about maybe a discussion about the traditional in terms of teaching strategies versus the course itself? Yeah.
All right. So the comment the way it is there anyone who wants to make changes to what is currently in the text? All right, I see no hands, so we will vote on comment 27 as it stands right now.
$14 yes, 1 no. Or I'm sorry, 1 I can live with it.
We have consensus.
All right, and we will move to public comment. Is that right?
That is correct. Great. I just want to say great job, committee members. I mean, these are the kinds of discussions that you sometimes engage in, and I want to acknowledge just sort of the fair approach that you took to this, and looking at different angles and considering different pieces of this very large recommendation, and how you just came together to decide on exactly what you wanted to recommend to move forward. So great job on that. We will project the public comment slide now. Okay, it is now time for public comment. Members of the public, you are encouraged to make your comments by calling the number on the screen. Once you're connected, we will acknowledge our commenters in the order that they called in. You will have a 2-minute time period for your comment, at which time we will announce time and move on to the next person. As always, please follow the rules of decorum and respect. You may also submit your comments in writing to the Math Framework mailbox at the address shown on the screen. Once again, before we begin, we want to remind everyone that there is a delay in the live stream. Therefore, we will allow a few seconds for that.
Caller, you may begin.
Hello.
Hello, you may begin.
Hi, my name is Annie Yoon, and I am a former middle school math teacher. I am now a professional learning provider at the County Office of Education and also a board member of California Association for Bilingual Education, CABE. And I have three aspects that I like to comment on. The first one is about bilingualism, biliteracy, and multiliteracy. There's nowhere in the framework that talk about it. The particular chapter that I reviewed, chapter 7, doesn't have any. And we do have more and more programs that are dual language immersion. We have a lot of English learners, and so we need to address that. The other one is about culture. Like I said earlier, as we all know, we have about 1.2 million ELs. We got about 1.1 former EL who are now fluent English proficient, and we have about 275,000 students who came in already proficient in both languages. So together, we got 2.6, which is about 43% of our students who speak another language and coming from another culture. And then the culture in the math framework, it will address a few places, but not in many places. And it wasn't really elaborate. It just briefly mentioned. The third one is about the vignettes. So in chapter 7, mathematics for understanding for grade 6 to 8, there are 3 vignettes, 2 of them for 6th grade and 1 of them for multi-grade. And I would like to request that we have vignettes for 7th and 8th grade, because whatever we are saying, the vignettes is the one where it's spelled out, where teacher can go there and see what we need to do.
That's time.
Thank you.
Next caller, you may begin.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Manuel Bonrostro, Policy Associate at Californians Together. Thanks again to the committee for your hard work over the past 2 days and for taking several of the comments that were submitted in our coalition letter to support language access and ensure that the framework is assets-based and culturally relevant. I have appreciated the discussion around Chapter 6, 7th, and 8th to continue to incorporate language support and add additional cultural relevance and assets-based language throughout. These are very important concepts to strengthen within these grade level chapters. We also think that the feedback that is being provided to the writers will continue to improve the framework, and we are available to help with additional examples and resources as necessary. One issue in particular that we noticed for Chapter 8 was how useful the paragraph about language development, UDL, and accommodations was in each of the vignettes. This is a great model to follow throughout, and in addition, it might be useful to also explain these ideas in describing the design of each task. We also appreciate the comments about referring to the English Language Success Forum guidelines when discussing the treatment of language. In addition, we have appreciated the discussion about the different pathways for students. We think that this is a very important discussion for equity. And as we think about the pathways in grades 9, 10th, and 11th, we definitely appreciate having an additional discussion about how students who take one pathway in grades 9, 10th, and 11th, and then decide to switch to a STEM pathway could accomplish their educational goals. Thanks again for your time, and we look forward to our continued engagement, and we'll be following up with additional examples of vignettes and strategies that could be considered in the framework moving forward. Thank you.
There's no further public comment.
Okay, with that, we will close public comment and return to the whole group discussion on Chapter 8. Diane.
All right, we are on comment number 29. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to that?
Sorry, I should raise my hand. Sorry, Dan.
No, you're good.
So this may have been cleared up. I just was when I was reading it through, trying to get the organization of things. I think we've done a lot of talking today and some things getting cleared up. And so it probably doesn't make, I'm going back and forth whether it makes sense or not, but really in Appendix F of the old framework where it has those courses laid out and what standard, and we were talking like substandard, like fit into those boxes. But I feel like maybe that has been taken care of today. So I don't know if the group agrees, but if so, then I'm fine withdrawing that. I don't know where we're at with that. I was having trouble understanding where things were fitting together before our conversation today. So.
All right. So you said you're willing to withdraw your comment?
Yeah, I'm willing to withdraw that.
All right. Thank you. Is there any objection to that? All right. I see no hands. So comment 29 is withdrawn. And we will move on to comment 38. Is there anyone to speak to that one? Christina?
I'm willing to withdraw. I think it's mentioned again in comment 45. It's just that the examples listed are incorrect, but we don't need both comments.
Thank you. Is there any objection to 38 being withdrawn? Cole?
Let's actually strike 45 because 38 actually gives why we should strike it. So I moved it. Mine was comment 45.
Okay, so you would rather strike 45 and keep 38?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. All right. And so any objection to withdrawing 45? And I see no hands. So in that case, we will vote on number 38. If you would please indicate now.
14 yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
And comment 44. And are there comments on this one? Lori.
So I actually looked up synonyms for traditional to try to find a better word because I agree. Because I'll just be honest, when my district was voting which way to go, I was very happy to have them go integrated. And it wasn't even about the courses. It was about it's a new course. So now I had a reason to push for new type ways of teaching. So I had a good word. Conventional came up to me instead of traditional. And I also thought of some synonym for split or sequenced coursing versus traditional, like, because it's a sequence, it's, algebra, then geometry. So I was thinking along those lines. I thought I'd just throw out what I was thinking and see if it bounced off anyone and became, and they were able to help me work it out.
Thank you. And Christina, then Cole, and then Aaron.
In the science framework, they call it the domain-specific pathway, so we could consider something like that. I also, in my work with districts, we tend to call it the AGA pathway, or just algebra geometry pathway.
Thank you. And Cole?
Yeah, and in my area, we've had one high school, one single district high school, make the transition to integrated in our whole county. And so the reason being for most that I have talked to, it's because when they saw traditional, that's what was comfortable. And so I am really trying to help make this push that we really need to start thinking and pushing differently. And I think that we really need to kind of maybe nail down a name together to make this happen. Because, yeah.
All right. Thank you. And Aaron, and then Dr. Lindeman. Oh, Aaron took her hand down. So Dr. Lindeman?
Well, I guess I just have a clarification question then. It's in the California Common Core State Standards traditional pathway. So I thought that sort of settles it for us, that we have to call it traditional pathway and there has to be an integrated pathway at a minimum. But I might be wrong about that.
All right. Would someone from CDE like to clarify just so we're all very clear on what can be changed and what can't be changed?
So I think what I'm hearing a couple of things. One is the desire to change the name. And then I'm hearing Dr. Lindemann say the name is consistent with how the pathway is referenced in the standards. Those are the sort of the balance that I'm hearing. In terms of the State Board of Education guidelines, you know, the guideline that I read earlier is specific that we must provide balance in terms of our treatment of those two pathways. If you want to name, again, I don't see a specific issue with naming but then describing the course pathway that represents the traditional pathway. I know that member Rucker's on, so she'll correct me if I'm off base. But again, I think it's fine if you want to come up with a suggestion, and if you want us to come back to you at the third and final read based on the suggestion that you provide today, we can do that as well.
Thank you. And Erin, it looks like you're next.
So along those lines, so again, a little bit of history. In the 2013, when there was the chance for the revision to the standards, the state standards that had been adopted the year before. And so there was a lot of work done then, but we were told, because the committee then wanted to change the name and put in a different name when it was adopted. And we were not allowed to do that because it was said that that's how it was written in the Common Core standards documents, which were suggested an appendix in coursification. So there was a lot of animosity around that. So again, if we can opt to maybe do the same thing that we're doing here, that the integrated, what used to be called the integrated and was our adopted integrated, we're now saying is the MIC type courses is what's suggested, then what used to be the traditional, and it's now going to be called this. I think that would help set the precedent of the idea that we're trying to get across, that it's not the same old thing we've always done. Let's just reside where we've always lived.
All right, thank you. So we have several suggestions here to change traditional or to suggest conventional, sequenced, or domain specific. And I see a couple of hands, Cole and then Lori.
Can we add maybe also or writer's discretion? Maybe there's something that is out there that might capture. I think that they've got our conversation in this too. So if none of those work or fit, maybe there's something better.
Thank you. And apparently several people had your idea because all the hands are gone now. And Lori. Oops, it looks like you're muted, Lori. Oh, and you're not muted, but I can't hear you. Looks like she's switching devices there.
Right, can we? Okay. I would like to suggest non-preferred be part of the title of that pathway.
We cannot state a preference in the title.
All right, and any other hands? So unless there are other suggestions to change the wording, we'll be voting on number 44 the way it is right now. So any other edits you would like to make? Rebecca?
should we add in something that says if the name can't be changed, then we want to make sure that there's a section like right below the the heading or whatever where it says traditional pathway, where we can kind of explain that this does not mean how it's always been.
Isn't that what we did in 27?
Well, I was just thinking if they didn't change the name, so are you guys okay with? I don't know. Maybe, yeah, I guess that's true.
Okay. So you're okay with number 27 and not changing 44? All right. And Erin?
So I would just caution, like the conventional is a great word, but I think to me that also gives the same general feeling connotation as traditional. So I would just be cautious about the use of conventional as the way to rename it. If we're going to rename it, we need to rename it like to make better sense and not give feelings of comfort in what we've always done.
Fine with conventional being removed. I was just trying to do synonyms.
All right, Lisa and then Bernadette.
Possibly adding in an idea for a name. Somebody earlier had mentioned AGA, the algebra geometry algebra pathway, or that's one of the ideas.
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Somebody had referred to it as AGA, algebra geometry algebra pathway.
Thank you. And Bernadette?
Along the line of renaming the domain specific also has a different connotation because it also gives me something about, the different domains, fraction, EE, F, and so on and so forth. So I would suggest to take that out as well.
All right. And Erin, and then we'll see if we're ready to vote.
So I would support what Bernadette just said, also considering the fact that both the algebra and geometry now contain statistics standards specifically, which is completely different than what used to be. So it isn't domain specific. And I think that domain specific also takes away from the categories of investigation that we're really promoting across the board.
All right, thank you. And we did put in there at writer's discretion, so they're not limited to these suggestions. All right, any additional changes to 44? And I see no more hands, so will you please vote on number 44?
$13 yes, 1 no, 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
All right, and now we're on to the first comments. And I'm going to ask that we strike comment 46 because we know that we cannot add the word preferred to that. So does anyone in Alpha Group object to that? Lindsay, you had a comment?
So we were just curious because the science framework, when we were talking about the differences between the two, and the wording for how they have, like there was, I think the table was inserted in here. They have the integrated and then the one that I'm forgetting, but the domain specific one. And in front of the integrated, it says preferred integrated model every time that it's kind of discussed. And so we were just curious why that worked in science, but not in math.
Sure, happy to explain. So again, that direction at that time came specifically from the board. So this committee has not received that direction from the board as contained in these math guidelines.
How do we try to get permission from the board, or what does that mean?
It would require a revision of the State Board of Education guidelines. So we, Member Rucker is our liaison. So that would be something that we would need to communicate with her.
Thank you for explaining that.
Sure.
Cole and then Dr. Bowler.
So I looked up the science guidelines just because I was curious. And so in 1B of their actual guidelines, the word preferred is used for integrated. So I don't know how we can communicate that, but that it's right there. So it distinctly different than how it's written in ours.
Thank you for looking that up. And Dr. Bowler.
Cole just answered my question, so it's okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. And Erin?
But that does seem to set a precedent, and I'm wondering if it wasn't put in our guidelines because it wasn't an option. So if that's the case, if we need to amend, if we need to ask for an amendment, how do we go about doing that so that this does go to the board before this is finished?
So we can discuss that with Member Rucker as our liaison to the board. I believe she's weighed in on this topic before, when this chapter came before the CFCC again. But again, we can discuss that with Member Rucker as she's our liaison to the board.
All right, thank you. So number 46, I think I need direction from CDE about what you would like us to do with this one.
I think it's been clear in terms of what I would suggest possibly not acting on it or putting a note. I mean, you can act on it in terms of letting us know that this is what the CFCC prefers, but ultimately it's not aligned with the State Board of Education guidelines, but we can ensure that we have further discussion or bring it back for additional discussion. So you may note it however you feel is appropriate for this document. However, the writers wouldn't be able to act upon it until there is any type of additional action from the board.
Shanine, this is Pam. I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I'm afraid Member Rucker is having technical difficulties, but I do agree that we need to have a discussion with her, and then we can apprise the Mass CFC of any, or if any, changes can be made at this time.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
We can, yes.
So this is Board Member Rucker. I'm hearing you just fine. I'm not having technical difficulties. I'm listening to your conversation, and I can hear you just fine.
All right, and did you want to weigh in now, or is this a conversation for later as far as requesting that the guidelines be amended?
Well, as I have told you all before, I have tried not to. I recognize that in my role as the liaison that sometimes when I speak, it also means I'm literally the weight in the room. I'm listening to your conversation and the reasons why you all want to define the integrated pathway as your recommendation that this be the preferred pathway, and that is your recommendation. And so I have heard that clearly, and it is a discussion that the board needs to have. There's a difference between, so let me say these things to you. First of all, there's a difference between the Common Core standards as they are adopted and the structure of the Common Core standards for mathematics and for English language arts, and the standards that were adopted that informed the development and framing of the science framework. And so while you can look at the outline of both of these frameworks and see the same similarities in the outline of the frameworks themselves, the content that these frameworks are intended to provide guidance on are very different. I want to remind you that the framework is not a mandatory document for districts to use and consider how they develop and implement their mathematics instruction, their science instruction, or any other subject matter instruction. It is not mandatory for districts to use that. nor for that matter is the adoption that is outlined by the criteria you will create in Chapter 12 mandatory for districts to consider in the textbooks that they select to as the foundation or as part of what they will use for their instructional program. The state of California could recommend 30 different programs as we did for science. Districts still have the flexibility to choose to do something else. So in choosing and wanting to go down this path to create a definition of what you, based on your experience as teachers and in what is clearly emerging as a consensus among this whole committee about what you see is your recommendation for what is preferred, how is that supposed to define for the field what that means? Because as we talked about when we met last month, districts still have the flexibility under statute to make decisions about coursification or about how they place students and about the pathways and the progressions that they will use to inform decisions for placing students in algebra in grade 8. So that's different from what is the state's intent and the state's instructional philosophy concerning the implementation of science. So my question to you, because I'm going to be asked this by the board members, in choosing to try to define the integrated pathway as preferred, is it your intent for the districts to look at and consider the integrated pathway in a way that conforms, confines, or constrains any of the other authorities that the district already has for implementing their math program?
Christina.
Well, to answer that question from my own personal opinion, I don't think our committee wants to constrain or tell districts what they have to do. Like you said, this is not a mandate. By saying preferred, we mean students will have more equitable access to mathematics. So that's our preference. But again, it's not a mandate. We're just saying this is a way that can open doors for lots of students, for them to see math as a connected, beautiful subject. And so we think it looks great this way, but there are other alternatives. But we're saying we prefer this because we feel that it will reach the most students.
Okay, so I appreciate and thank you, Christina, for saying that. So if that is your rationale, then let me tell you, with the ways that you're writing these amendments, that's not what I'm reading. What I'm reading is that the reason why you want to make these amendments is because the science framework says that. If what your rationale is that you're trying to express in the amendments that you're recommending is truly what Christina just said, that's not what this says right now. That's the reason why I asked that question.
All right, thank you. And Lindsay.
So my group was the one who wrote this, and exactly what Christina is saying, that was absolutely our intention always, is that the integrated pathway is more equitable for more students. So it's going to set more students up for success in math. We have such a diverse population in California, and we want them all to succeed. The only reason we put anything about the science framework in there is because we had that conversation of, oh, wait, yeah, it does say that in the science framework, so maybe we can do it in the math framework as well, because districts still have that choice. They get to choose whichever one is, like, Erin said, it's not a mandate, but it's just that we are able to let them know which one is preferred because it's more equitable for more students. So that's the only reason the science is even brought up in number 46.
So I'm resisting the temptation to say, well, then what you need to do is in line 46, where it says the CFCC wishes to add preferred to the integrated pathway. Let me suggest gently the rest of that subordinate clause at the end of that sentence needs to be revised to actually explain the rationale behind why you're saying it's the preferred pathway, because right now your rationale is because the science framework says it.
I appreciate that, but we can definitely do that.
All right. Is there someone who wants to take a stab at that? Christina.
I see Erin has an idea too, but I was going to say that we could use the language I mentioned earlier that add prefer to the integrated pathway to show how it can allow more equitable access to mathematics for all learners in California, something to that effect.
And Erin?
I meant to take my hand down. I was hoping Christina would take it on that one. But yeah, I was just going to, again, the reason that we put the precedent of the science framework is because of the history that I had from the 2013. But that idea is that there are a lot of professionals in this room that have come together for this. And based on all the research, the integrated and the model that we're putting forth in the integrated is more equitable for students and all of our students throughout the state of California in terms of having them understand and appreciate mathematics.
I'm just interrupting for a moment because I've been trying to capture this and I don't see it reflected in what I see on your screen. And I'm just wondering if you need
Thank you, Letty. Let me refresh my page.
Thank you.
Oh, we just lost our internet here. Thank you for catching that. We will look into our technical problem.
Let me read out loud what I have while you reconnect. So right now I have the CFCC recommends adding preferred to the integrated pathway as it does in the science framework to show how it can allow more equitable access to mathematics in this pathway. Okay, it still needs work, but that's where I am. To show how to allow more equitable.
All right, thank you. And it looks like a few people have ideas, so we can start with Janet.
I just refreshed my page and then I lost 44. I want to just try to add some detail. So first of all, I think that we take it out any reference to the science framework. So the CFCC recommends adding preferred to the integrated pathway as this pathway allows more equitable access to students, whatever it is. But I think we need to add detail. And so, Christina, you had mentioned why does an integrated pathway provide more access? And it has something to do with making connections, and you also said something about joy. And so I'm also right now trying to look through catalyzing change for high school mathematics to see what some of the language in there is. But I think we take science out and we need to add detail. We have a thesis sentence, but what we don't have is our supporting argument.
Right, thank you. And just a quick question regarding technology access. If there is someone who on the CFCC who doesn't have the live document up so you can't see the changes being made, could you just click the no button really quickly? All right, so it looks like we did have one person. Did we get the live one back up?
We're back up.
Okay, perfect. All right, in that case, we'll move to Janet and then Christina.
I just said my thing. Let me put my hand down.
Okay, thank you. Christina and then Dr. Bowler.
So the detail I think that Janet was asking for, when I stated it the first time, I talked about seeing math as a beautiful and connected subject, and so that they can see joy or, have joy with what they're learning in mathematics.
All right. I'm not exactly sure how that can get added on there. So do you want to try to actually dictate?
Yeah,
I'm
I'm working on it.
Okay. All right. We'll go to Dr. Bowler and then Dr. Ford.
I was just wondering if it would be useful to bring in the data we have on the huge numbers of students of color who fail algebra and get into a cycle of just repeating it over and over again. The statistics from algebra teaching are pretty horrific, and we could certainly link to that if that would help justify our claim that this different pathway would be more equitable.
All right, we'll give Letty a minute to type here.
Do you need, can you see, I just said possible link to study. Do you want more specific?
It was around regarding Algebra 1 and achievement of underserved students. Which is probably not the right term, but on the fly, that's the one I came up with. And we can definitely change it. Dr. Ford and then Janet.
I was just going to respond to the question of having to have your argument in this change recommendation. We are happy to do that lit review for this work and include the argument if the research backs it up, which we believe it does. So I don't think you need to try to craft what the research argument is in order to make this recommendation. We'll find it.
Great.
Well, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to do this right now, primarily because when I make a report to the board about the work that's going on with the framework and the conversation you are having, I do need to explain what it is you were thinking, and I feel it's incumbent upon my role to carry what your concerns are. I think it's also important for me to share with you what the board's concerns are about math and math instruction in this state. You know, the current data that's being reported on the performance of students on statewide assessments in mathematics shows across the board and across the state, in districts across the state, students are underperforming in math. And it's not just students of color, and it's not just in districts that primarily serve students of color. So I want to make sure that you're not coloring this idea that in some way we are creating equity for students of color, when in fact all students, regardless of whether they're students of color or not, are underperforming in the math assessments and in math in general across the state. So it's not just about creating equitable access for students of color. This is about the purpose of the framework and the work that we undertook at the beginning of this. And I want to remind you, this is what I spoke with you about. Our charge here is to figure out what it means to provide good mathematics instruction, what it means to address the standards for mathematical practice, and how that's going to inform and provide guidance to improve math instruction. You know, a high tide raises all boats, not just the boats for some and not just for some and not for others, based on the size or the cost of what of the vehicle, or that metaphor is beginning to fall apart. But you see where I'm going with that. So here's the thing. While I appreciate that this is for many of you an equity issue, the fact is the board sees this as a statewide priority and a statewide problem across all student subgroups and across all districts in this state. And so the idea that you are proposing is to look at a way that creates access and defines the development of the math progressions across the grade levels and across grade spans in a way that assures that students have a broader access to mathematics, not just as a discipline or course of study, but as Dr. Bowler said, as something far more significant. So I understand what you are trying to get at, and so I want to make sure that when I'm tasked to try to explain to the board what you're asking them to do, because you're basically asking the board to rewrite what their charge to you is and to rewrite their priorities, I need to be able to make sure that your priorities match up with the explicit priorities that the board has as well. I hope that makes sense to you.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Janet?
So I'm going to come back to the ICAS statement that I referenced yesterday and today. And it says, the competencies that UCs and CSUs want is that students have a perception of mathematics as a unified field of study. Students should see the interconnections among various areas of mathematics, which is often perceived as distinct. That is what we're talking about. So including language from that ICAS and why that supports understanding. If I try to learn these scales and then these scales and then these scales, it doesn't let me play music. So yeah.
All right. We'll take 3 more comments and then hopefully be able to vote. Erin, it'll be Erin and Stephanie and Dr. Bowler.
So first off, Janet, I love what you just brought up about the ICAST, and I agree that that should be part of what's in there. That is part of the rationale, and maybe we haven't all put it so eloquently. But then I'd also like to thank Board Member Rucker for helping us craft this and really listening to what the committee is saying about this, because again, I feel being on the last framework committee, I feel that there were a lot of things that were shut down, and it's been very frustrating. So this is the first time I feel like maybe we are being heard, and so I'd like to thank you for helping us talk about this now.
All right. Thank you. Stephanie?
Yes. So thank you, Board Member Rucker, for actually bringing up the underperformance of California students. And not to change the subject entirely, but I feel like this is also cycling back to the instructional materials and just bringing that up again to think about that in terms of crafting that chapter when we get back to it, because that was something that stuck out in my mind as far as the underperformance. And the students need to have a vehicle that is matching everything that we're doing in these other chapters, including all the integrated pathways and showing that there's a preference for them and things like that. So I feel like it just completely cycles back to that topic as well.
Thank you. And Dr. Bowler?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Thank you, Stephanie. We do need to keep really thinking about how all of these ideas go into the chapter on instructional resources. And I also want to thank Board Member Rucker. And I was just going to say that we can, in this paragraph, say that we can link to studies showing both the inequities of Algebra 1 and the widespread failure rate of students in California. I don't think it's hard to broaden that out in terms of how those programs have not been serving students well.
And so then I think you can remove some of that sentence. So it would just say regarding Algebra 1 and widespread failure. All right. So with that language, is there anyone who wants to make any more changes before we vote? All right, I see no hands. So will you please vote regarding comment 46?
14 yes, 1 no, and 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
All right, we will move on to comment 47. And I have made myself a list here. The remaining comments, there are a lot of duplicates because they're referring to the same line numbers and they're supporting the same line numbers as each other. So for this comment on 47, it's also comment number 78. So if we vote on one, we probably don't need to vote on the other one. And Lena, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I have proposed 78. Since it matches 47, I'll withdraw mine.
All right, thank you. All right, any comments or discussion around comment 47? And I see no hands, so we will vote on 47.
Yes.
Consensus.
Thank you. And comment 48 is the same as comment 57, and so I would like to withdraw comment 57 if there are no objections. All right. And then is there any comment or discussion on number 48? All right. See no hands. Can we please vote on 48?
Yes.
Consensus.
And comments 49, 55, and 70 are all the same, or refer to the same letter. So comment 55 was mine. I'm willing to withdraw that if there is no objection. And I see no hands. All right, so we will vote on 49, and then we can decide if when we get there, if we need to vote on 70. So vote on 49, please.
Yes.
Consensus.
Comment number 50 is the only one on this particular line. Any comments or discussion? Okay, let's vote now, please.
Yes.
And comment, oops, sorry.
14 yes, 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
All right. Comment 51 is the only one that refers to line 925. And is there any discussion on this? And I see no hands, so we'll vote on 51. Comment 50. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep getting ahead of you.
Consensus.
All right. Comment 52. Janet.
This started out as taking something from the Californians Together comment where they were talking about making sure that you can transfer between courses in 11th and 12th grade. And we looked and we thought that that was addressed when they talked about the pathways, but then realized that really some commentary about why students would want to choose different pathways. What if it was talking about their educational post-secondary goals. And so as we create, as the pathways diversify, the goal used to be, I'm going to fulfill my A through G requirements so I can get into college. But now if I have multiple third-year courses, why might I choose data science over algebra 2 over something else? So trying to provide some guidance to a broader audience than just math teachers, but how might these pathways work for kids?
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments on 52? I see no hands, so we can vote, please.
Yes.
Consensus.
Comment number 53. This is from the group I was in, and the only part we need to vote on is to include the two high school standards, and those last two bullets are the format for those standards. So is there any question or discussion on that? There are no hands, so we'll vote on those two bullets to add them to 53.
16 yes.
Consensus.
And comment 54 is one that was already approved. It just was supposed to be added to this chapter also, I believe is why it's there.
That is correct.
And comment 56 is the same as comment, or the same letter as comment 71. So I'm willing to withdraw 56, and then we can vote on 71 when we get there. And let's see. Let me just double check one thing. Yep, okay, that one was already withdrawn. So comment 58, I would like to withdraw also 59 because they're addressed later on. So if there is no objection, I'll withdraw 58 and 59, and we will get to them later. And I see no hands. Comment 60 is the only one that addresses line 470. And is there anyone who wants to discuss this or has a question? I see no hands, so we will vote on number 60.
Yes.
Consensus.
And I would like to withdraw number 61 because it is also number 76. So if there is no objection, I will withdraw that one. And I see no hands. So we will move to number 62. This is the only comment that addresses line 1941. Any discussion on this one? And I see no hands, so please vote for comment 62 if you would like that one to move forward.
Yes, 2 I can live with it.
Consensus.
And comment 63 looks a lot like the one in number 52. Christina, do you want us to vote on this one? Is it different enough?
So I'm looking through here. I see that the language does say that they should be able to take any fourth year course, but it doesn't give any guidance on how they might get there. Like if I've chosen statistics as my third year course and I decide now that I want calculus, what are my options for learning some of those standards that maybe I didn't have exposure to? So I feel like this is a little bit different than the previous comment.
Okay. And any other questions or discussion on number 63? I see no hands, so will you please vote on number 63?
Yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
And we are on to Delta Group, comment number 64, and we're to the point where there's only one more duplicate left, so this is the only one regarding this. Is there anyone who wants to speak to this one? All right, let's vote, please. Number 64.
Yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
And comment 65. Is there anyone who wants to speak to this? Because this isn't an action, it's more of truly a comment. And so I think I need a little bit of clarification about what this is asking for us to determine. Cole.
So this one just deals with the vignettes that we talked about in the last two chapters, just making sure that they know to refer back to how we asked that to be set up, I believe is what this comment refers to.
Okay, thank you. And Christina?
I was just going to say 21 and 23 were both mine, and I withdrew them already for that reason, because I think we included that comment with all the vignette asks.
Oh, all right. And Erin, did you have a comment on this one?
Number 73 basically restates that vignette conversation that we put in the other ones. If you look down at 73, it's got it right there.
All right. Oops, lost the one we were on. All right, so number 65, can you please vote for that one?
No.
Consensus to not move it forward.
Comment 66, is there any comment or question on this one? I see no hands, so please vote on number 66.
Yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Comment 67, is there anyone who wishes to speak to this one? I see no hands, so we will vote on 67.
We're waiting for 1 vote from Stephanie. 12 yes, 4 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Comment number 68. Any questions or discussion around this one? And there are no hands, so we'll vote please on 68.
Yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
69. Any discussion on this one? There are no hands, so please vote.
Waiting on 1 vote from Lena. 15 yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Comment 70. Any
We already
discussion?
approved this as 49.
Okay, so do we want to withdraw this one? Stephanie, is that okay with you?
Yes, if it was addressed, definitely.
Okay, thank you. And comment 71. Any discussion on this one? There are no hands, so we will vote.
Yes.
Consensus.
Comment 72. Any discussion on this one? Christina.
So this is sort of tying in the CalTOG letter, but the rest of the language has already been approved in the previous 2 grade band chapters.
All right, and I'm drawing a blank. Oh, Lena. Selena, are you satisfied with the way this has already been addressed, or would you like us to still vote on it?
Yeah, I know this was for the grades 6 through 8, but I also wanted to make sure it got included for 9 through 12.
Okay. So any further discussion? All right, let's vote, please.
Yes.
Consensus.
And comment 73. Any discussion around this one? All right, I see no hands, so we will vote.
We're waiting on one vote from Lindsay. 16 yes.
Consensus.
And Cole for number 74.
We can go ahead and strike this. This has already been taken care of by the beta group.
All right, thank you. Is there any objection? Okay, thank you. We will strike number 74 and comment 75. Any discussion around this one? There are no hands, so please vote on number 75.
Yes, 4 I can live with it.
Consensus.
Comment 76. Is there anyone to speak to this one? And there are no hands, so please vote on 76.
Yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
And comment 77. Is there anyone who wishes to address this one? There are no hands, so we can vote, please, on number 77.
Yes, 1 I can live with it.
Consensus.
All right, and 78 has already been removed, so that is the end of the additional comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I will turn it over to Director Coates, and I will project our final slide of the day.
All right. So we've come to the end of meeting 6, which generally would be our very last meeting. But again, we have more work to do, as you know, as you've been deeply involved in that work. So our next meeting is December 2nd. That will be meeting 7. And then we'll have our final meeting 2 weeks thereafter. So we will begin our final review of the entire framework with those December meetings. So right now we are planning to bring to you at the December 2nd meeting, Chapter 9, Supporting Equitable and Engaging Mathematics Instruction, Chapter 10, Technology and Distance Learning in the Teaching of Mathematics. We'll have an update from where the Sacramento County Office of Education is with their distance learning guidance. Chapter 11, Assessment in the 21st Century. And then we will also revisit at that time Chapter 12, Instructional Materials. We plan to send the materials out to you the week of November 16th. And so you really started today actually doing what we are asking you to do in our meetings in December, which is provide your feedback in a holistic manner, examining all of the chapters for cohesiveness, for continuity, and for coherence as a whole. And so we thank you for actually starting that work with your reviews today, and we'll continue along those lines in December, as well as continue the conversations around the requirements outlined in the State Board of Education guidelines, and make our fine-tuning of our final recommendations to the Instructional Quality Commission. So again, you will hear from us in a couple of weeks, the week of November 16th, as we prepare the documents to send to you in preparation for December 2nd. Are there any questions before we adjourn? Okay, everyone. Stay safe. Be well.